So let's talk a little bit about building authority. So a lot of you guys tend to overcomplicate this topic. It's actually very simple. Building authority comes primarily from a couple kind of core steps. Number one is your agenda, okay? By establishing the agenda and by telling your prospect, here is what we're gonna do on this call, you tell them that you're the person in charge, okay? It's very simple, right? So set your agenda. That's the first step to building authority. Number two is simply how you speak, which is the confidence in your voice, okay? If you're hesitant about everything you say, if you don't sound like an expert, you're never gonna have authority on your call. Now, does that mean that you need to be an expert in whatever it is you're selling? Does that mean that if you're selling real estate coaching, you got to be a multi-millionaire in real estate yourself? No. Does it help? Yes. Not because you actually do it, but because you can actually have the confidence in the way you speak, generally speaking. Some people don't have the confidence even from that, but it helps. So confidence in your voice, super important to building authority. Throughout the whole conversation, not only the agenda, okay, but throughout the whole entire conversation. Now, another thing that builds authority is the question, whether it's e-com, real estate, let's just stick to e-com to be consistent, but have you done this before, okay? By asking that question, let's say with e-commerce, in your situational based question, transitioning into vision, have you done this before? You're building you're building authority naturally, because if they say no, then ultimately you become the expert subconsciously in their head without you saying, hey, I do e-commerce, because for many of you, that's not true, right? But in their head, if you ask them, hey, have you done this? And they say no, now you're the person that's in charge. You're the person that has authority because you've been selling for X, Y, and Z, who naturally in their head is an authority figure, right? That connection, right? If you're selling for, one of the big e-com coaches, Justin Wool, Tai Lopez, whoever it is that has credibility, naturally you become a position of authority because you're representing them without you having to actually say, hey, I do e-commerce, because for many of you, that's not true, right? And obviously we don't want to lie. So by asking, hey, have you done this before? If they say no, you in their head become a figure of authority. And number two, if they say, yes, I have, well, you can ask them, hey, how's that gone for you? Okay, if it's gone well, great. Why are we on this call today? What do you need help with? And again, they're coming for you to help, putting you in a position of authority. That question is super important. Have you done this before? That naturally establishes authority pretty much no matter what their actual response is, okay? So establish it in your agenda, establish it in your confidence, establish it in the question, have you done this before? And then another thing that's really important when it comes to establishing authority is that I want you guys to understand that, look, people are booking these calls, people are buying these programs or courses because they need help. They need your help, not literally yours, but whoever it is that you're representing and you're selling for. Naturally, they are coming for help. Not necessarily, I don't want to say they're coming from a weak position, because it's totally okay. And obviously I commend them for looking for help and looking to grow. But if you think about it from the sales perspective, they're coming to you, right? So understand that in your head, understand that in terms of your mindset, right? I was doing a coaching call the other day and somebody said, tell me a bit about what you do, please. Get rid of the please. There's no need to ask them, no need to say please. They're coming to us. We're doing them a favor, right? A big part of authority is going to come from your mindset and just simply understanding that your prospects are coming to you. They're looking for help. And maintain that frame, maintain that composure throughout the entire call. Okay, now obviously you don't want to be a douchebag and you don't want to be like, hey, motherfucker, you're coming to me, right? That's not the mindset we want to have, and that's definitely not how we want to come off. But in your head, I do want you to understand, like, hey, they're coming to us for help. We're not chasing their business. So maintain that frame. Those are kind of the main things that are important at keeping authority. And just be selective with the words that you choose, okay? Be very careful with the words that come out of your mouth. Anything that lowers your status, get rid of, okay? I've heard it a couple times in people's agenda. People say, hey, I wanted to touch base and answer some of your questions. That lowers your authority. That makes you sound like a customer support person rather than an account executive. So just be very selective. Keep this in mind. I mean, most of it's pretty logical. If we went line by line, we'd probably be sitting here in this video for, 5-6 hours. But really just understand that it comes down to your agenda, your confidence, the mindset, and the understanding that people are coming to you for help, and then select your words. Be very selective and make sure the things you say don't lower your frame. We're an account executive. You're not a customer support representative. Keep this in mind. Let's rock. Super important video about raising belief levels. We talk about this, guys, all the time in the course, on the coaching calls, and it's really important, but most people don't understand how to actually raise somebody's belief level. So let's talk about what I mean by raising somebody's belief level. So if you're selling e-commerce and you hear somebody's telling you, well, hey, I don't know if this is gonna work for me, or I don't know if this even works, or like, how do I even know it's real? How do I know I can make money? It tells us that their belief level is low, okay? And all sales is a transfer of certainty and a transfer of emotion when it comes to whatever it is that you're selling, right? And obviously, if somebody doesn't believe that e-commerce as a whole works, there's no way you're selling them an e-commerce program, right? Now, when we raise belief level, I want you guys to really think about why somebody's belief level is low. I see a lot of students that I've trained, they recognize that somebody's belief level is low, and then they'll just go start talking about how great e-commerce is, or how great real estate is, or whatever industry they're selling is. However, the problem with that is that you're not actually raising somebody's belief level, you're raising their interest level. And there's a huge difference between the two. Somebody could be highly interested in something and highly curious, but that doesn't mean they actually have intent, okay? And if there's no intent, you're not getting a decision by the end of the call. Nobody's gonna buy anything from you at the end of the call. In order for somebody to actually make a buying decision, they need to have 100% conviction. In other words, belief. Okay, interest does not equal belief. Okay, so stop talking about how great real estate is or how great e-commerce is or whatever it is that you sell, and start really understanding how to build belief. And I'm going to show you that right now. In order for you to build somebody's belief level, you have to understand why it's missing in the first place, right? And that could be challenges that somebody has gone through in the past. Maybe they tried e-commerce before, but they didn't succeed. In order to raise somebody's belief level, you have to understand why it's missing in the first place. And the way you're gonna do that is simply by adjusting your line of questioning. So somebody might tell you, something like, hey, I'm just not really sure if this is gonna work. Before, again, not about your program, but specifically about whatever industry you're selling, say e-commerce. And you're gonna say something like, okay, I totally understand that you might be a little bit skeptical. And let me ask you, Mr. Prospect, why is it exactly that you don't think it'll work for you, right? So again, see how I specifically changed my tonality in the for you part, because they said, hey, I don't know if it's going to work for me, right? So you want to adjust your tonality and with your line of questioning to specifically understand why there's a lack of belief level. And they might tell you something, well, look, I've tried e-commerce before and I've spent $1,000 on ads and I only got 2 sales. Okay, gotcha. So let me ask you, is it that you were struggling with your advertising, or was it that you didn't know how to find the right products? What is it exactly that you maybe struggled with? And they'll tell you hey, I just don't think that dropshipping has high enough margins because I was barely profitable, right? So that's their concern, right? So potentially margins, okay? So if it's margins, you want to raise their belief level specifically about this. And everybody has different reasons why they don't have a certain belief level, right, in whatever it is that you're selling. However, if their interest level is high, which it is, because they're on a call with you for a reason, they're not just there to listen to you speak, you have to understand why the belief level is lacking. So is it that they don't believe in the industry as a whole? Probably not, because again, they wouldn't be on a call with you. Is it that maybe they don't believe that there's high enough income potential? Is it that they don't believe that they could do it? Maybe they're not tech savvy, right? And maybe that's their concern. That's the whole beauty with e-commerce. It's that there's no coding required, right? You could use tech like Shopify, for example, that has drag and drop features. So whatever the reason for the lack of belief, that is specifically what you want to address, not the whole industry as a whole, not talking about how amazing e-commerce is and how much money you can make. In some cases, that's fine, but you need to understand, why is there a limiting belief? Why is there a lack of belief level, right? There could be a lack of belief level because, hey, they don't believe in themselves. Maybe they don't believe in their skill set. Maybe they don't believe in their abilities, like tech, for example. Maybe they don't feel tech savvy. Or sales, maybe they're an introverted person, right? That's one example. Another example is maybe their belief level is low because maybe they just don't have enough money to test different products for advertising, right? That could be another reason, right? But whatever the case is, find out why this. Why is there a lack of belief? Only when you understand why there's a lack of belief can you actually raise it. You can't raise somebody's belief level if you don't understand why it's lacking in the first place. So ask questions, right? Ask questions to understand why their conviction level isn't full, why they're not totally on board in terms of belief level. Find out why, and then tailor your response to whatever the reason is why their belief level is lacking. How could you do that? You could do that through analogies, for example. You could do that through storytelling. You could give case studies. You could, show testimonials, for example, who went through similar lack of belief. But you have to understand what is the reason for the lack of belief, and only then can you go in and raise it. Okay, I'll give you an example. Hey, Don, I'm not sure this could actually work for me. I've seen other people do it, but I don't know if I'm able to do it. Okay, that's what the prospect tells me. The way I interpret that is, hey, they know that it works, right? Because they said, I've seen other people do it, but I don't know if I can personally, if I have the ability to do it. Okay, so they're doubting their skill level. So I need to raise their belief specifically when it comes to skill level. That's the piece that's missing. Yeah, and I totally understand, Mr. Prospect. And hey, at the end of the day, you're never gonna start a new business, or you're never gonna start hobby or sport having all the skills, right? It's something that gets developed over time. Like, let me ask you this. Do you play any sports? Yeah, yeah, I play basketball. Okay, well, did you step on the court in first grade and swish every shot? Probably not, right? So you're not going to be born with the skills, but it's definitely something you develop. Is there something specific you're unsure about? Is it like building out the store that might seem a little bit difficult? Is it actually finding the suppliers? Is it the advertising? Like, what piece are you actually a little bit scared about? Oh, I'm scared about building out the store. Hey, I totally get it. And frankly, building out a store or a website 5 years ago or 10 years ago would have been insanely difficult. You'd have to do all this custom coding before, all these no-code platforms were available. Right now, the beautiful thing is with a $29 per month Shopify subscription, you have access to literally a drag and drop software. And on top of that, you have a bunch of themes to choose for. So you don't have to get caught up thinking about the store. And even better, you could find somebody on Fiverr or Upwork, a freelancer who can build you a Shopify website for $50. Aside from that, Mr. Prospect, is there anything else that you're a little bit skeptical of? Oh no, it's just building on the store. Boom, that's it. I figured out why there's a lack of belief. I raised it, now I can keep going. Do not ever keep going if you heard that your prospect has a limiting belief. Do not ever keep going into the next step, because you're never going to be able to raise their conviction after you've dropped the price. You hear a limiting belief, you hear a concern, you have to raise their belief level right away. Okay, so step one, really listen to what they're telling you. Really listen and try to understand, why is there a lack of belief? What is it specifically that they lack belief in? Number two, once you've listened, identify, okay, what is really the core problem here, right? Is it that they lack belief in themselves, the industry, their skill set? What is it? Find that out, and then raise their belief level by specifically addressing the concern pertaining to why their belief level is low in the first place. Okay, and you can do this again with stories, analogies, testimonials, case studies, many ways, or simply by just telling them, by simply challenging their beliefs. Super important, guys. I want everyone to really understand this. If you have questions, drop them either in the Facebook group or just bring it up on one of the coaching calls, and I'll happily clarify this. But understand that interest does not equal belief. So stop telling about people how great e-com or real estate is. For whatever it is that you're selling, nobody cares. That does not raise belief, and that definitely does not raise intent. And to buy, people need to have high intent. Okay, I'll see you guys in the... So let's talk about future pacing. This is a very simple concept. This is going to be a pretty short video, but simply what future pacing is, it's pretty much like assuming that your prospect is already in the program that you're already selling. Or if you're not selling online coaching and training like we are, it's the assumption that they've already purchased whatever it is that you are offering. Okay, so for example, all this means that we're changing, the words that we select. So for example, if we're talking about somebody's goals, right? Instead of saying, if you were to start X, Y, and Z, because that gives them an option in their head, like, okay, I can do this and I can also not do this. We're simply going to swap the vocab we use, swap the language to say, when you start, okay? Or 6 months down the line, right? Assuming they've already started, right? So basically, you're not giving them an option like, if you do this or if you don't do this. You want to say when you do this, okay? So assume the sale, okay? And what this does, number one, is it puts people in a decision-making state, in a decision-making frame. And also it allows them to think as if they are already sold, which makes it easier for you to close the deal because they're now not exploring do this or don't do this. Their only thoughts are when I'm already doing this. So it's pretty much like you've already pre-sold them. There's multiple places where you would do this, even in vision-based questions, for example. So instead of saying, if you were to start, you're going to say something like when you start this or when you do this or 6 months down the line, assuming they've already started. But you're also going to do this a lot in your actual presentation. So for example, if you're selling e-commerce, instead of it being if you were to start running ads, for example, or if you wanted to test certain ads or certain products, Bob or whatever coach would be helping you through the whole process, right? You're not going to do that. You're going to say, when you're actually ready to launch or when you've already launched your product, you could actually schedule calls with blah, 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 blah. For example, right? So it's simply tweaking the language to pretty much assume the sale. Okay, super important. It's a very subtle concept, but it makes a huge impact in somebody's head. Okay, so I really want you guys to understand that. Now, the other thing when it comes to future pacing is that you want to make sure that you're not overdoing it. If you're saying every time when you do this, when that, assuming, or you know, you're not going to say the word assuming, but if you start overdoing it, your prospect will catch on that like, okay, this guy's speaking to me weird. Like he's speaking to me in future tense, you know, like that's not how you want to be speaking to somebody, right? It's got to be subtle, okay, and a few times. So it's almost like you're hinting at it, okay? Another important concept when it comes to future pacing is that you're not only changing the words, right? So like when you do this or when you do that, but you also want to make sure that through the whole process, as you're selling the prospect, you're also painting that picture for them, right? Not only in the words that you're selecting, but the overall frame, the overall positioning of everything that it is everything that you're saying. So even when it comes to, you know, their belief level, for example, right? So instead of saying like, oh, if you were to make X, Y, and Z, or if you were to do this, or if you were to do that, you want to avoid that kind of terminology because you want to be painting the picture for them and putting them in that future-paced mindset throughout the entire conversation, as if they're already sold, as if they're already doing whatever it is that you're selling. That's pretty much it for future pacing. This goes for storytelling as well, right? So make sure that even when you're telling stories, whether it's to overcome objections or build deeper level of rapport or relatability, whatever the case is, make sure that in your hero's journey, you're hitting this part as well, right? You're hitting the future as well. So you're showing them the outcome as well, right? A lot of people, when they tell stories, all they tell stories is like, oh, this guy was struggling or that guy was struggling. And then he did this or did that, but then they fail to actually paint the picture of what happens in the future as an outcome, right? And we all know that when it comes to sales, people only make decisions based on certainty of outcome. That's it for this lesson. Pretty simple. A couple of you guys asked me to talk about it a little bit, but just adjust your tonality, adjust the words that you're choosing and the pictures that you're painting to put people in that mindset of already being sold, okay? Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about this right here, motivation, which is super important in sales. Now, look, I can sit here and make a 40-minute video or make an hour or 5-hour long video about motivation, how to have it, how to find it, this and that. But really, I'm going to break it down to what I think is like the super simple and general version that I think is going to be applicable to everyone. So getting into sales, guys, at the end of the day, the reason I got into sales and a lot of other people and probably yourself get into sales is simply because you have control over what you make. So whatever you put in is what you get out. You put in work ethic to make 6 figures, you make 6 figures. You put in a work ethic to make multi-6 figures, obviously combined with growth and practice and skill, you will make that exactly, right? So the beautiful thing about sales that it's the most forgiving sport. It doesn't care about your background, it doesn't care about where you're from, your experience, your knowledge, your formal education, your degrees, your masters and your PhDs. Nobody cares. If you can bring money to a business, they will happily pay you a cut. So when it comes to motivation, if that alone does not motivate you, if your earning potential does not motivate you, if the fact that you can actually get compensated for what you're worth does not motivate you, then you probably shouldn't be in sales. Okay, I'll be very honest with you. But when it comes to like my personal goals and my personal motivation, I understand that, look, sales has peaks and valleys, and I don't let peaks and valleys dictate my motivation. My motivation is consistent because I'm very in line with my goals. Okay, I know my goals for the day, for the month, for the year, and every single day, the actions that I take are directly in line with this, right? The reason a lot of people lose motivation is because there's a misalignment between their goals and the work ethic that they put in, right? And whenever there's a misalignment, right, if your goal is to make 6 figures, but you're only putting in work ethic to make $4,000 a month, you're never gonna make 6 figures. And as a result, people don't make as much as they wanna make because there's that misalignment between their goal and their work ethic. And all of a sudden, their motivation just drops, right? And frankly, I understand that it drops, right? If you're consistently wanting to make one amount and you're not making it, yeah, you might lose motivation, but you have to realize that the most important thing for you to have motivation at all times, and yes, obviously you're gonna have peaks and valleys, is keeping your goals and your work ethic aligned, okay? The times for me where I've had the highest motivation is where my goals and my work ethic were always perfectly aligned. And I've noticed that for me, the times where I felt the least motivation is when my work ethic dropped, when I got a little bit complacent, when I kind of got comfortable and I kind of settled, that's where my motivation dropped as well. So I'd say the biggest thing is have very clear and very perfect alignment between your goals and your work ethic. You can't have 6-figure goals and 5-figure work ethic. It's never gonna work out. You're never gonna hit your goals, and then your motivation is gonna drop. Now, another thing I really want you guys to understand, like, yeah, it's okay to have that, like, those times where you're like unsure, right? It's totally normal, but it's what is in your control is what do you put your time, energy, and attention to? Do you put your time, energy, and attention on the like contractionary thinking, on like, oh, what if this is not for me? What if it doesn't work? Or do you put your mind on the expansion thinking, on expanding your goals, expanding your work ethic, expanding your skills, right? That's what it comes down to. You are not in control, okay, of your highs and lows to an extent, right? Obviously, you could do whatever you can, but there's always going to be peaks and valleys in sales, right? But what you can very well control is this right here, your mindset, right? Make sure that your goals and your work ethic aligns, and make sure that you're not sitting there thinking about the what ifs, but you're taking the time and focusing your energy on the expansion thinking, on thinking big, expanding your goals, okay? Yeah, like I said, I can keep sitting here and, record this video for hours, but I think that's one of the biggest things, right? And then the other thing is like, who do you surround yourself with? If you surround yourself with people lower than you, if you surround yourself with people who are not ambitious, don't have any goals, that'll rub off on you and your motivation will drop too, and you'll want to sit at home and be a bum and do nothing. I'd say the biggest thing for motivation is like just making good decisions. Make the decision to put in the work. Make the decision to eat healthy food. Make the decision to get in the gym. Make the decision to surround yourself with people who are ambitious and not dragging you down. Motivation comes from good decisions. See you in the next one. All right, let's talk a little bit about smoke screens. This is my attempt at an illustration of some smoke for you guys. It's good enough. Anyway, let's talk about smoke screen. So what is a smoke screen? Most of you guys already understand this, but some of you guys asked for a video that explains this a little bit more in depth. So I'm recording this video here. So a smoke screen is when you get somebody to tell you one objection, which is not really the real objection. And let me tell you guys this, 99% of smoke screens, or 99% of objections rather, are smoke screen. Okay, so with that being said, does that mean that there always gonna be some nonsense, some BS, like, oh, let me go pray, or let me go do this, or let me do that? No, but oftentimes the first money objection you might get is also a smoke screen, right? Like you guys know, if you've already watched the videos, there's 3 different types of money objections. They have the money, but they don't see the value. They have the money, but they don't have full certainty, right? There's some skepticism, whether it's trusting you, trusting themselves, limiting beliefs, whatever. And then they have the money, they don't physically have the money. Oftentimes, people will tell you that they don't have the money, but the reality is that they just don't have the money for this, okay, which makes it a smoke screen objection. And if you were to just give people a payment plan when they don't see the value or when they don't trust you, nothing's going to change, right? Think about it like this. If somebody has an objection and their core kind of objection is that they have the money, but they're skeptical. They don't believe that they're going to see the outcome. And you're selling a $10,000 program. Well, giving them a payment plan of $5,000 today and $5,000 in 30 days does not change the fact that they don't think they're going to see results, right? And then people are like, oh, well, I gave him a payment plan. He still didn't. Yeah, because you handled the wrong objection. Smoke screens, number one, I want you to realize is usually the first objection that they give you, the first thing they say is not the real objection. It's simply their defense mechanism, right? Telling you, hey, I got to do this. Or I got to talk to my wife. I got to do this. I don't have the money. That's usually not a real objection. So usually number one is defense mechanism, right? Think about it like this. Anytime you guys go shopping, you go to a store, salesperson comes up to you, can I help you find anything? Nope, I'm just looking. Are you really just looking? Women, maybe. Men, probably not. Men don't just go, oftentimes, obviously there's exceptions, but I don't just go shopping. I don't go to the mall just to look around. I go and I know I want to buy this, I want to buy that. But I still say, hey, no, I'm just looking. Not because I'm actually just looking, but because that's my defense mechanism, right? So that's also an example of a smoke screen. Now, this can be with, same thing with a wife objection, right? Oftentimes that's a smoke screen because if we go through the process and ultimately say, if your wife said no, what would she be saying no to? And they say money, okay, so the wife was also a smoke screen, right? So most of the time, guys, the first objection you're gonna get is a smoke screen. And you just need to, first of all, understand that that's the case. And number two, understand how to handle it. So let's talk about how to handle a smoke screen. Number one, don't let what people say overpower how they say it, okay? So I want you to always pay attention. What are people saying and how are they saying it? Typically, if there's a misalignment, you know there's a smoke screen. So if they say, hey, I don't have the money right now, nobody's gonna say that, right? If they didn't have the money, you would hear in their voice, like the fact that they really wanna do it, but they don't have the money. You would sense that, right? So if that's not the case, you know, it's a smoke screen. So pay attention to not only what they say, but how they say it. Okay, so how do we handle a smoke screen? Well, very simple. That's why we have our 5 steps. Number one, neutralize. Number two, isolate. Isolate with what they tell you. So if it's, hey, I got to think about it. Okay, gotcha. I totally understand. And aside from you wanting to, you know, take some time to think about it, now you got to be careful there because you don't want to make them believe that you're buying into their bullshit. So what you want to do is you want to position it in a way where you're using it to extract the real objection. I totally understand. You want to think about it. Gotcha. And aside from you just wanting to take a little bit of time and think about it, what's actually stopping you from getting started? Is there anything else stopping you from diving in? And they'll tell you, no, not really. Okay, gotcha. So when you go back home and think about it and you're in the shower thinking about it, let me actually ask you, what are you actually going to be thinking about? And then they'll tell you like, oh, I'm going to think about whether or not this program is the right fit for me, or I'm going to think about the $10,000 investment. So that's why we have the steps, right? 1 being neutralize, 2 being isolate, okay? This is where we're finding out whether or not something is a smoke screen. But again, don't overthink what people say. I want you to listen to how they say it, okay? When you figure out the real objection, you go through steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys know those steps by now. And just really pay attention to how people are saying it. I can't emphasize that enough. A lot of people get caught up on what people say. And again, don't forget that most money objections that you're gonna get right away are a defense mechanism. They're not actually the real money objection, right? If somebody tells you they don't have the money, doesn't mean that that's the real money objection. Usually it's either they don't see the value, or even more likely, 90% of the time, they are uncertain of the outcome and potentially they don't trust you, meaning you didn't build enough rapport. So that's a quick lesson, guys, on smoke screens. Listen to what people say and how they say it. Understand that typically the first thing you get is not the real objection, but it's rather a defense mechanism. Don't forget the steps. Number 1, you got to neutralize, and then number 2, isolate to get the smoke screen here, the smoke, get it out of the way, and then handle the objection by going through steps 1 through 5, okay? I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so guys, I'm shooting this video because some of you guys are a little bit confused about what unspoken objections are. Okay, so really if you think about it, I mean, unspoken means they were not spoken, they weren't said, which means that towards the end of the call, when you go through the program, you drop the price, you tell your prospect about all the value, they might not tell you, hey, you know, I don't have the money, I got to talk to my wife, or, you know, I don't know if I have the time, but they're still not going to move forward, right? So Unspoken objections, I mean, pretty logically, is when the prospect has an objection, but they just haven't said it to you, okay? And this is gonna happen very often. What this means is that you have to address it even though they haven't actually told you the objection. And a lot of times when people start out in sales, you know, they do some training, role play, they don't get an objection and they're like, okay, let's go, let's move forward. How would you like to pay? You want to use like Amex, Visa, whatever the case is. And the reality is that most of the time what happens is the prospect's just going to hang up because they had an objection, which you should have known, okay, but you didn't address it. And so you send them a little link or you take them through the payment process and then they'll probably just hang up on you. So let's talk a little bit more about unspoken objections, how we can identify them, okay, and how to actually address them. So number one, what you want to be listening to is their tone, okay? So if you go through the whole presentation, you drop the price, you've told your prospect about all the value there is, and then they just seem a little bit hesitant, that's when you know that, hey, there's probably an objection, even if they didn't tell you what it is, right? They might give you a smoke screen, right? They might not have the money for it, but they might tell you, hey, it's the time, or they tell you, hey, I got to talk to my partner or my wife or whatever the case is. But with unspoken objections, you'll probably just sense a little bit of hesitation in their tone. So they might not tell you, hey, I need to think about it or I need to wait on it or whatever the case is, but you'll hear the hesitation, you'll sense it. So it'll sound something like, you know, whenever you're presenting a program, it's 10 grand, it's a one-time investment of 10,000 bucks. And then your prospect will say something like, oh, okay. All right, yes, sure, sounds good. And it's like, you could tell from their tone, from their voice that, hey, there's some skepticism, there's some hesitation, right? And you want to address it because like I said earlier, if you don't address it, all that's going to happen is number one, they're probably going to hang up on you as you start taking them through the payment process. And then number two, they're probably never going to call you back and you'll probably never be able to reach them again. They're going to go ghost. So number one thing you want to listen to is their tone. Okay, you'll be able to generally sense that skepticism, that hesitation, even if their actual objection is not verbalized. Okay, the number two thing that you want to be paying attention to is their response. You want to listen to their response. So if the words that they say aren't actively saying, you know, hey, let's go, let's do this, and they're also not giving you an objection like, hey, it's money, hey, it's this, hey, it's that, then listen carefully to what they say. They might say something like, okay, cool. Do I have to do this now? And that's not necessarily an objection, right? That's not them telling you, hey, I don't have the money or I don't have the time or I got to speak to, you know, my spouse. But generally when they're asking like, oh, do I have to do this now? There's probably an underlying concern, whether it's money or value or, you know, certainty and outcome, whatever the case is, right? So really listen to that response. Okay, so those are really the two things here that you want to be listening to. And from here, what you want to do is you want to try to elicit a response without being too like confrontational. You don't want to be like, okay, why are we not moving forward? Why are we not doing this? Because generally speaking, when somebody has an unspoken objection, they might not be as comfortable. And the moment you come at them with like, why are we not doing this? They're probably going to want to back off. So make sure, especially with these kinds of leads, in general, you don't want to be confrontational, but definitely with these kinds of leads, you want to try to elicit a response without being too forward about it. Okay. So you could say something like, you know, you sense some skepticism, you sense like some hesitation. You could just say like, John, before we actually move forward here, I want to make sure I answer any questions that you might have. It sounds like something's on your mind. Don't be like, okay, why are we not moving forward? But really just like try and address whatever the concern is, right? Try to figure it out, right? Because if you don't figure out the objection and you move forward as if there's no objections at all, you're never going to get the sale, right? There's something they're thinking about. And generally speaking, I mean, just like with all objections, but here especially, right, your unspoken objections, typically the main problem is obviously going to be the money. Whether that be them not seeing the value or them potentially not being certain of outcome. I'd say generally when it comes to unspoken objections, it's either physically having the money or probably having the money, but just not being fully certain of the outcome, or there might not be enough rapport. So they maybe just don't fully trust you, right? So anytime you go through the program, you drop the price, you give the whole presentation, I want you to listen to their response, right? So listen to the tone in which they give you their response, right? Whether it's a real objection, right? Whether it's a spoken or unspoken objection, and then listen to the response itself, right? And if you sense any hesitation whatsoever, do not move forward. Do not try to go into the payment. Don't rush, okay? Because if you rush the payment, if you rush to the payment before actually getting the lead sold in here, you're never getting the money. I want you to understand this. Just because somebody says yes or says, okay, let's go, or all right, it doesn't mean that they're fully sold, okay? When somebody is fully sold and fully ready to go, you will hear it in their response and also in their tone. So listen to these two things. Try to understand hesitation. And then once we've understood this, then we go here and go through steps 1 through 5, handling the objections. But again, with these kinds of prospects, you want to be a little bit more subtle and less forward, less upfront about it, right? Because the moment they feel like it's becoming a battle, a confrontation, the sale is over. You're never getting that sale. So that's kind of a little bit more on unspoken objections. Now there's obviously different unspoken objections, but oftentimes, guys, when you get these unspoken objections, I want you to understand that they could have been prevented. Oftentimes, the unspoken objections you get, you would have gotten clues about them earlier in the call, right? So in challenge-based questions, the reason they haven't got started with whatever it is that you're selling, oftentimes will turn into an unspoken objection right here. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention to that. That's what you want to look out for, the tone and the actual response, and then understand their hesitation. Once you understand, you go through steps 1 through 5 of handling objections. Very simple. All right, let's move on to the next lesson.
Okay, guys, so if you're watching this video, it means you got the 0 to 100K blueprint. And what I want to do here is show you exactly how you go from making $0, never having done online closing, never closing a deal in your life, whether you have experience, you don't have any experience in sales at all. I want to show you how you go from 0 to making your first $100,000, okay? You invested in yourself, you took this blueprint, and what I want to do is show you exactly the steps that you need to take to make your first $100,000, right? Because having a skill is great, right? And having a skill set that can pay you for the rest of your life is obviously super important. But at the end of the day, if you don't know how to apply it and you don't know where to use it, that skill set will no longer be there to pay you for the rest of your life, right? So I want to jump on here and explain to you the first, second, and third step that you should really be taking in this business as an online closer so you can make your first $100,000 quickly, okay? Now, I'm also gonna put together a PDF. It'll be somewhere down below or above this video so you can click it and download it and you have kind of visual representation of it. But I'm gonna chat here for about 30 minutes and explain exactly how you go from 0, not having made any money at all, to making your first 6 figures, okay? So a couple things here are super, super important, okay? You have to keep in mind that every single business needs salespeople, right? Because every single business needs customers. There's not a single business out there that doesn't need customers to thrive and survive, right? So automatically, by being able to communicate well and close deals, you put yourself in the top 5 to 10% of people in the world, because most people don't know how to sell and aren't good at communicating. They don't have effective communication skills, right? So just by putting yourself in a position where you learn how to sell and learn how to communicate, you automatically level up, right, in terms of high value skills, right? Now, there's plenty of businesses that need closers, right? Whether it's online coaches, right, or online consultants, or even people who sell physical products, right? There's some websites that sell physical products. Somebody messaged me the other day on Instagram. They have a sauna business, right? They sell portable saunas on their website. That's a $10,000 item, right? And although I've made majority of my money selling for online coaches and online consultants, keep in mind that there are plenty of other businesses that require closers, right? And at the end of the day, your skills are very transferable, right? Meaning that not only can you use the skill to sell for online coaches and online consultants, but you could sell for regular online businesses too, right? Think about it this way. This company that sells portable saunas on their website, not everybody's going to come to the website and automatically buy a $10,000 product, right? There's what we call a consideration cycle, right? People need to think. People need to, see if their finances are right. People need to see if it's the right product for them, right? And oftentimes, these business owners, whether it's an online coach or this person who owns the Sana website, they don't have the time to actually get on calls with every single potential customer and explain how their product works for the customer to find out if it's a good fit for them, right? So what happens, right? What happens next? My light just turned off. Okay. What happens next? What happens after that, right? So what's going to happen is a customer comes, they have a lot of questions that don't get answered, and then what happens next is they simply leave the website and don't buy, right? Whereas if the business owner plugged in a closer like yourself into their business, right, automatically they have people calling potential buyers that could have actually been paying customers that would have been lost if nobody had called them, right? Because these business owners are too busy working on the product. They're too busy working on the marketing, customer service, legal, accounting, compliance. There's so many things that these business owners need to worry about, right? So with that being said, we're going to talk about the steps that you guys should be taking to start making money quickly. So what are your first steps, right? You got to understand that every single business owner is very, very skeptical when they bring on a salesperson, right? Because the salesperson is a direct extension of the business owner and of the business, right? You're the one speaking to their potential customers. You're the one speaking to their clients. You're the one speaking to people and telling them about the product, offer, or service that you're going to be selling. So right off the bat, it's very challenging to land really good gigs as a closer because as a business owner, it's almost risky for them, right? It's not that they don't want to make more money, but it's that they're very careful and very conscientious of the people that they bring in that are representing them, okay? So with that in mind, step one really that you should be taking as a closer is actually learn how to sell, right? Number one, learn how to sell. Learn the buyer psychology. And I teach you everything really in this course, but learn buyer psychology, right? This is something you can learn for literally years. You can learn this for decades actually and still not know everything because the human brain is so complex. So you want to learn a little bit and have a good grasp of basic human psychology, right? Buyer psychology, the different types of buyers there are, the scripts that we use, handling objections, the frameworks, all the basics, you want to have that down, right? If all you're doing is reading off of a script that's given to you by your client, you're not really going to close any deals because reading off a script just makes you sound like a robot. So you want to first learn the principles of sales, the very basic principles, buyer psychology, right? The different types of buyers there are and how you should approach each type of buyer differently. The scripts that we use, right? What to say when somebody tells you, hey, I don't have the money. I can't afford this. I don't know if it's for me. I don't have the time. I got to talk to my wife. I got to talk to my accountant. Right? Knowing how to handle every single objection, right? And really this isn't very complicated, right? Because you can learn the theory, right? But the most important part is applying it. In sales, it's an art and a science, right? So you could learn the science, right? You could learn, exactly what to say when Bob says this or when John says this or when John says that, right? But at the end of the day, it's more than that, right? Because everybody is different. Everybody comes from a different walk of life. Everyone has different values. So every single conversation will be different, right? So you need to understand the science, right? So the strategy, stuff like that, which is, basically the theory. And then you need to understand the art, which is actually how you apply it for each and every different conversation, right? So step one is learn the fundamentals and learn the foundations, which is what I put this course together for, right? Step two is landing a gig, okay? Landing an opportunity, all right? Okay. Here's the reality of it. It's really, really not complicated, right? There's a lot of online coaches out there, right? Look, here's the truth. Some of them don't have as many leads coming in and don't have as good leads coming in. But step one is just start, right? Your first client most likely is not going to be somebody who pays you $30,000, $40,000 a month, but it could be somebody who pays you $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month, right? So step one is start, learn the ins and outs of the business, and then afterwards you can look at, okay, how do you take it to the next level, right? How do you now go from a coach where you can make $5,000 to $10,000 a month to someone who you can make $10,000, $20,000 a month? And the reality of it is that, yes, there's a lot of room in the online coaching space, but if you don't want to go that route and you're passionate or you're interested in something else, You could find businesses that need closers in pretty much every single niche, right? It's very simple. Reach out to them either via social media or call them or send them an email and say, hey, I'll work for you for free. There's zero risk for you. You don't have to pay me any money up front. I just want a little chunk of what I bring to you, which you wouldn't have had in the first place, right? If you bring a business owner 20 grand or 50,000 bucks a month that they would have never had in the first place, they will be happy to pay you 10, 15, 20% of that, right? Just depending on what their costs are, right? That's why I love the digital space, selling online courses and education and working with online coaches, because their costs are so low so they can afford high percentage commissions, right? 20%, they can do that all day long, right? Because they don't really have any hard costs. Whereas if, with a sauna company, for example, it costs them a lot of money to actually make these saunas, right? So step one is landing a gig. The way you're going to do this is reach out to a bunch of people on Instagram or on LinkedIn or any, form of social media, right? It's fairly simple, right? Your whole idea here is I'm going to work for you. You don't have to pay me anything upfront. There's zero risk for you. It's all upside, right? So if there's a coach who sells a fitness program, for example, I'm going to message him and say, hey, I noticed you have a fitness program. I'd love to close deals for you. And the best part is I'm not going to charge you any money up front. I'll only take a small chunk of the business that I bring to you, right? So this is a very easy way to land clients. And, if you guys are in my coaching program, you don't have to worry about that. I have a high level coaching program where I actually pair you up with clients. If that's something you're interested in, you can apply to join my coaching program. But if not, that's totally okay. It's very easy to land clients. You just got to find something that you're somewhat interested in, right? Something you're interested in selling, because if you're not interested in whatever you're selling, you're going to burn out fairly quick. Okay. So you find a client to sell for, right? Now is where it gets a little bit more complex, because now we go back into the reputation thing, right? For me as a business owner, I know that every salesperson that works for me is a representation of who I am, right? And it's me putting my reputation on the line for Bob to sell for me and John to sell for me and all these other people, right? So what happens is when I hire salespeople myself, I'm very, very, very selective, because I know that, caller Bob is a direct representation of me and my company and my values and my beliefs, right? So once you've landed a client, I really recommend that you always have an open conversation to them, or with them rather, on their values, right? So you land a client and you're going to ask them, hey, what are your values, right? Like, what do you want to come across on the sales calls, right? And then I will also ask your client, hey, John, have you ever done any of these sales calls? If yes, can I listen to some of them? And what this will do is this will give you an opportunity to really understand your client's selling style, whether they're more of a consultative person, whether they're more, motivational. And you want to make sure that the way that you're selling is very, very similar to your client, right? And the reason for that is because the way your client sells is probably how they come across in their coaching program, right? If you have a client selling an e-commerce coaching product, for example, right? And they are generally more consultative and less motivational on their sales calls, that means that when they're running their coaching program, they're probably the exact same. And what that means is that if you're speaking to a prospect, if you're on a sales call and you're speaking to your prospect in one way, and then they get in the program and they're spoken to and coached in a very, very different manner, they're going to start to get cold feet. They're not going to be as happy, right? So you want to make sure that the client you're selling for, you really understand their values, their beliefs, their styles, so that you can then in turn adjust yours to match your clients, okay? Most people don't do this, and then what happens is they close a lot of deals, but these leads come in and they're a little bit confused because it's not what they were expecting, right? So this is something that I really recommend you guys do. Take the time to understand your client. Take the time to understand their values, okay? So that's the second step, right, after you've landed a client. After that, what I recommend you guys do is really, really, really take some time and go through the program that you're selling yourself, right? Now, I don't believe that if you're selling an e-commerce program or a real estate program or an investing or stock trading program or fitness or anything else, I don't believe that you have to be an expert in what you're selling, because at the end of the day, sales, your success in sales is not a matter of how good you are and how well you understand your product. It's more of a matter of how well you're able to build rapport and build trust and build a relationship with your client, or with your prospect rather, right? So I'm not saying that you guys should become fluent at your product, right? You're not the coach, right? But you should have some level of understanding of what you're selling so that you're able to answer basic questions that you're going to hear from prospects on your sales calls, and so that you can actually give them guidance and sound like an expert, right? If I'm buying something, if I go to a car dealership, for example, I want to buy a new car, whatever the car is, and the person that I'm talking to sounds like they don't know what they're talking about, it makes me a little bit hesitant, because I want to buy something from someone who's in a position of authority, someone who understands what they're selling, right? You don't have to know every single detail, right? If I'm going to buy a car, let's just say this G-Wagon over here, right? This Mercedes G-Wagon. I don't need somebody at the dealership to tell me this is the engine, this is the performance, this is the exact weight, and all this stuff. It's unnecessary in order for me to move forward and make a buying decision, right? But if there's certain things that I am interested in, some basic factors, then I would expect the salesperson to be able to answer very simple and basic questions, right? So your role is to, number one, build a relationship with your prospect, but also be able to answer some of the basic questions you have. Because if all their questions were answered and they had no objections and nothing to ask you, then they probably wouldn't be on the call with you. They probably would have bought directly off the website or webinar or whatever your client's sales process is. They probably would have been a buyer already. So they will have questions, and you do need to prepare for that. Okay. So that's the next component. Really get a good understanding. It doesn't have to be anything too advanced, but understand what you're selling. Once you understand what you're selling, you want to practice, obviously, right? You never want to practice sales on the phone with your prospect, right? Role play with your friends, role play with people in our community, in the Facebook group. Always take the time to practice before you get on your first sales call. I can't stress this enough. A lot of people that I've seen come into my program don't do any practice. They just get on calls, read the script, and surprise, surprise, they don't get any sales. And then what happens is they leave a bad taste in their client's mouth on the first couple days, first week, and then the client tells them that, look, you're not closing. I don't want to work with you anymore. So make sure that you're practicing before you get on actual sales calls, right? Because again, this goes back to the whole reputation thing. If you sound like you're unprepared, if you sound like you've never done a sales call in your life, if you sound like you have no idea what you're talking about, the customer will know, the prospect will know. It's not going to leave a good taste in their mouth. You're not going to close deals, and you're going to lose clients, right? That's not how you build a business. That's not how you build a six-figure or multi-six-figure income in closing, okay? So you've done that. You're starting to get on sales calls, okay? You're closing deals for your client. Things are going well. Now, how do you get to that next level? Okay, how do you go from $3,000, $4,000 a month to $10,000 a month? Now is where it gets more challenging, okay? You will have days where you close deals. You'll have days where you close no deals, right? One thing that's very important to understand is, especially in the early stages of your career, it'll be very cyclical. You will have ups and you will have downs. You'll have days where you close a lot and you make a lot of money, and you'll have crappy days where you don't even get a sale. Mindset is the most important thing. And I talk about this in the course. I really can't stress this enough. You got to keep your head up on the high days and on the low days, right? Now, it's important that, look, let's just say you close $10,000 or $15,000 in a day. You made $1,000 in a day in commissions. You're calculating, you're doing the numbers in your head. You're like, hey, there's a $30,000 a month. Great. Next day, you start off on a clean slate. You can't let your ego get in the way. You cannot have this, you can't have this emotional high. Now, next day, you're not working as hard. You can't have that. Every single day is a new opportunity. Every single day is a new day for you to call your prospects, to close deals, and earn commissions, right? So if you had a great day, good. Next day, you're off to a clean slate. You're starting from zero again, right? Now, same goes the other way around, right? If you have a crappy day, if you have a shitty day, you close no deals, that's okay. Welcome to sales, especially early in your career. It will be very, there will be a lot of fluctuation, right? If you have a shitty day today, that's okay. Leave it behind you. Next day, clean slate, high energy, high enthusiasm, put in the work, make the dials, right? You can't have a shitty day and then bring that shitty energy into the next day. It won't work. right? You have to keep your head up. You have to treat every day like a new window of opportunity. Okay. Now, the other thing is you always got to keep working on your craft. I've had a lot of salespeople come into my office, start getting on sales calls, make, $5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand the first month or two. And then what happens is they stop learning. They stop getting better. That cannot happen. Okay. It's a constant game. It's a constant battle. Okay. Whether you have a good month or a shitty month, that doesn't change anything. Next month, new opportunity. You got to get better. You always look, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. Right? So what I say to my sales guys all the time is every single day, at the end of every single day, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. Take one of your calls, listen to the recording, see what you did well, and see where you could have improved. Because A, success leaves clues, and B, failure leaves clues. So take some of the calls where you closed and see, okay, I did this well. I built a good report. I handled this objection well. And, let's say I built really good trust, right? Now, do that on the calls you close, right? Reflect on the wins, but reflect on the losses too. So if you had a deal that you didn't close, but you felt the lead was closable, think back and say, okay, what could I have done better? Listen to your call recording. I used to do this all the time when I was starting. 30 minutes to an hour every night, I would listen to my call recordings and take notes on what I could have done better. Okay. And what I did is every time I took notes, the next day I would read over. I have a notebook literally all the time with me every single day. I have a notebook even with me right here, right now. I always reflect on my wins and my losses, and you should be doing the same thing too. Okay, see what you're doing well, see what's working, see what's not, and always adjust, right? If you see something isn't working, you need to be adaptable. Salespeople need to be adaptable. See what works and see what doesn't. Every client is different. Their audiences are different. Their leads are different, right? So you need to be able to adjust on every single call, okay? So that's a third or fourth step. I kind of lost count here, right? Always improve, always strive to get better. Once you've gotten better, you're closing more deals, look at your sales process, right? Look at your competitors, see what other people are doing, right? I sell my sales course, which you guys purchased, right? For $3. So I'm always looking, okay, there's this person in my space and he's selling it this way and he has a video before, or he does this or he does that, right? So work very closely with your client and with their marketing team and analyze the sales process of your competitors and see what they're doing that you can apply to your sales process to make it more efficient and make it better. That'll bring you more leads, more opportunities, more money at the end of the day in your pocket, right? So now if you want to go from 10 grand or 20 grand a month to 30, 40, or 50, now you got to help your client too. You can't just think about yourself. Go to your client, look at what other people are doing and take bits and pieces of their sales process and see how you can apply for your client, okay? So that's how you go from 0 to 20, 30, 40, 50K a month. And by doing so, you put yourself in a position where you're easily making $100,000 a year. Okay. Now, with that being said, not every coach has ambitions that you might have, right? Some coaches just want to make 10 grand a month. If they're making 10 grand a month, they can't be paying you the full six figures that they're making, right? So I would also suggest don't get too emotionally attached. If you have an opportunity where you're making a couple $1,000 a month and there's just zero room for growth, it's okay. There's plenty of businesses out there, plenty of coaches out there. Don't get too emotional. Look for opportunities. Now, don't jump from one opportunity to the next. It takes time to build. But if you're going for months and you see there's no growth, no signs of improvement, don't be afraid to walk away and find an opportunity for you to make more money, okay? At the end of the day, your time is valuable. You have a high value skill, right? Don't be afraid to find a new business to sell for, okay? So guys, this is how you go from zero, not having any clients, to landing clients, making your first, $10,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month, and really making a good high six-figure income, okay? If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. I'm also, like I said, going to leave a PDF for you guys to be able to visualize this, right, and have a step-by-step blueprint, like I said. But I wanted to record this video so you really understand what you do, right? Day one, learn sales, learn the basics, learn the fundamentals. Day two, find a client. Then day three, find out and learn more about your client's industry. You don't have to be an expert, but understand the basics, right? So on and so forth, okay? So the blueprint, like I said, is going to be attached below. If you guys want, I'll probably leave a link down here somewhere where you could get on a consultation call with one of my career placement advisors and see, what your kind of closer archetype is and what you would be good in selling, right? But otherwise, that's all for this video. I hope you guys got value, and I hope this kind of makes your journey a little bit more clear, okay? And I'll see you guys on the inside. I'll see you on the next coaching call, and I'm happy to help. Cheers.
Yo, what's going on, MC family? Welcome back to another training. It's Aman over here. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to deal with financially unqualified prospects. Now, before we actually dive into the topic, I want to say this. Depending on where you are as a closer and where you are on your journey, you are going to completely handle these sort of prospects differently. Now, the reason why I say that, if you just started as a closer, let's say you just got placed, let's say you just got your first sales role, you want as many conversations, as many presentations, and as many objections thrown at you so that you can gain the experience necessary to thrive in that role. Now, if you're somebody who's a little more seasoned, you're somebody who's more experienced, let's say maybe it's your second or third month as a closer, most times you're gonna have a packed calendar. Let's say you have 6 calls back to back to back. You might not be able to have an entire conversation with somebody and present what you're offering to them. Let's say you are that person. You are somebody who has a packed calendar, you need to be very efficient with your time, and you have leads at your disposal to call and close. When you come across somebody financially unqualified, keep in mind, you need to gauge it. I have never been a fan of asking somebody, hey, what's your budget? Because it just creates unnecessary friction and tension throughout the call, and they'll kind of just be combative. Well, how much do I need? What are you thinking? What's this gonna cost? Right? People don't make decisions on price, they make decisions on value, remember? So I don't necessarily like to ask the budget question, but I gauge my prospect's financial situation throughout the call. If somebody's telling me they're unemployed, or if somebody's telling me they're paycheck to paycheck, and I'm selling a $10,000 offer, probably doesn't make sense to present what I'm offering to that individual unless they explicitly tell me, yeah, I have the resources to do something like this. You know what I'm saying? Let's say you gauge it, you do everything right, you can tell that right now might not be the best time to offer your program or service to the individual you're speaking to. Here's exactly what to say. Be calm, be chill, and more importantly, have your prospect's best interests at heart. It's gonna go something like this. Mr. Prospect, from everything that you're telling me, it really sounds like diving into this opportunity is not only something you're eager about, but it sounds like it could really change your life for the better. But if I'm being honest with you, it doesn't really seem like it makes the most sense for you to dive right in, head first, balls to the wall, just because of the situation you're in. I know you mentioned, things are kind of a struggle, things are stressful right now, and this is just going to add more to your plate. And if you're not in a position where you have the funds to handle all of that, you're probably just going to dig yourself into an everlasting hole that will be incredibly difficult to dig out of. So what I think we should do from here, I think it's best if we put a pause on this. You keep doing research, keep planning your entry into this entire opportunity, but focus on fixing your financial situation. See what you can do to get into a better one, and when you do, I'd be more than open to jumping on a call with you and seeing what we could do to better support you at that time. Does that sound fair? Your prospect, they're gonna be taken back. They're gonna be caught by surprise. They're probably used to speaking to closers who hard close the shit out of them every opportunity that closer gets. And you just came in being different. You came in with the prospect's best interests at heart, and you conveyed that through what you just shared. Prospect's probably gonna respond with, wow, yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad that, I'm really appreciative that you didn't try to hard close me. I feel like, you guys and the company you're representing, you're really looking out for me. Yeah, man, I completely agree. Just a question, when do you think you'll be in a better position financially so we can attack this head first? Prospect will respond, guess what? You just got a lead that you can add to your pipeline. Now with that pipeline, we'll go over this probably in some other videos, but it's important to nurture that lead. Just because you had one conversation with them doesn't mean 3 months down the road, they're gonna buy. You need to have those touch points, right? Send them value ads, send them testimonials, check in on them and their progress. Actually care and watch how your prospects take care of you. It's as simple as that, guys. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. We'll be sure to get to it. But I'll catch you guys on the next training. Till then, stay safe.
Okay, let's talk about challenges. Now, when we talk about challenges, you guys know the framework in terms of the questions we ask: situational, vision, challenge, and consequential. So challenges refers to two things, right? Challenges refers to the challenges somebody's experiencing, right, in starting X, Y, and Z. And then the personal challenges, right, like mental blocks or a lack of belief level, right? So oftentimes, you guys do role plays and a prospect tells you one of their challenges in situational based questions, and you find yourself asking, should I address it now or should I wait till challenge based questions? And sometimes, or not sometimes, very oftentimes you guys ask me, should I address the challenges or should I wait till challenge based questions? So that's what I'm making this video for. It's gonna be pretty short because really the concept is fairly straight cut, okay? So there's two types of challenges. Number one is / opportunity specific. And then, okay? So whenever somebody gives you a challenge that is a belief challenge, right? So like a limiting belief, right? Or a lack of understanding, for example, or certain uncertainty, you're gonna address it immediately, okay? Immediate, okay? You're gonna address it immediately. Okay, when somebody gives you an industry or opportunity specific challenge, you're gonna leave it to challenge-based questions, right? So that's really the difference. When you're getting a challenge that is mental, right, like a limiting belief or a mindset issue, we'll classify it as a mental block, a limiting belief, or something that's not circumstantial physically, right, mentally. When you're getting a limiting belief, right, something that's mental / mindset, I want you to address it right then and there. Otherwise, you're gonna get it later as an objection. If you ask, hey, how come you didn't start this before? And they'll tell you something along the lines of like, hey, money or this or that. Something that's physical, like the one here, right, industry or opportunity specific. You're gonna wait to address it in challenge-based questions, okay? So that's really the difference, right? These are physical limitations, right? Like not physically having the money, not physically having the time, which again, that one can be a little bit, we'll call it gray area. That could be a limiting belief they have. They might think that they need more time than they actually do. But generally speaking, if it's a physical challenge, right, that's generally gonna be industry or opportunity specific, you're gonna wait and address it in challenge-based questions. If it's a limiting belief, usually a mental thing or a mindset thing, you're gonna address it right away. Okay, so that's how you know whether you should wait to address it later or address it immediately. Okay, I hope that clarifies things for you guys, and make sure you do that on your next.
Think of that one person that you trust with your life. Okay, you laugh together, you cry together, you have shared experience together, and through that, you've built trust. Okay, and how do you become that second best friend to your prospect? You share experiences, you relate to them, you find their pain points, you call them out on the bullshit, because your best friend will call you out on your bullshit, right? And by the end of this video, you guys know exactly how to build trust the right way through building rapport. How do you build rapport? Let's talk about that for a second. Again, why do we build rapport? So that we can build trust. The first thing that you need to do as soon as you get on a sales call is build rapport. That's the first thing you need to do. And you're doing that from the beginning all the way to the end. And by the way, by the end of this video, guys, I'm going to show you a pro tip that I do to build rapport in the first 3 seconds of a sales call. So stay tuned for that. Now, the first thing that you need to do on any sales call is build immediate what? Rapport. That's the first thing you have to do so that you can build trust, so that we can open up our prospects so we can find their needs, their pains, their goals, right? And we do that by building rapport first, not the other way around. We don't gather intelligence first and then build rapport. That doesn't work like that. And I'll tell you why in a second. Before we dive into that, let's talk about what rapport isn't, okay? Rapport isn't just finding common ground. It's more than that. It's connecting on a deeper level so that you can be looked at as a trusted advisor who's gonna get them from where they are to where they wanna go in their life. And you don't do that by relating on a physical level, meaning you don't talk about hobbies, sports, the weather, right? You know, oftentimes, I'm sitting in this office over here, I have my reps come to me and say, hey, listen, I had a great call, but I don't know why I didn't close them. I'm like, okay, what were their pain points? Like, I don't know. Gotcha. Why were they even on the call? I'm not sure, but we had a great conversation about soccer for like 20 minutes. Me and him love the same team. Okay. And that's exactly what happens when you think that you're building rapport and talking about these things. That actually undermines your expertise. They might like you, be like, hey, he's a cool guy, but he doesn't know anything about what I want to accomplish. Rapport is more than just connecting on that physical level. You need to connect more of an emotional level, a psychological level. And I'll show you guys how to do that right now. So what is rapport? How do you build rapport? You ask good questions that actually show that you care and you understand about your prospect's situation, where they are, where they're trying to go, and their challenges, why haven't they gotten there yet, right? And not only that, you can ask great questions, but if you don't do it using the correct tonality, then you best believe you're gonna have a surface level conversation and nothing more than that. See, often prospects will give you vague answers and surface level answers because most salespeople do not know how to trigger an emotional response because they don't know how to use the right tonality. For example, when you're in the discovery phase of a conversation, you got to use more of a curious tonality when you're trying to understand their current situation, right? So something like, hey, John, give me a rundown. What is it exactly that you do for business? And that way I sound more curious and it makes them think that I actually do care about them. So that's why they actually open up, because I seem interested. If you want somebody to be interested in what you have to say, you got to be interested in them first. So using the correct tonality. Another example is using a challenging tone whenever you want to call them out on their shit. For example, you're on a call with somebody and they tell you how they're running an amazing business right now. They're doing amazing and they're just on the call right now looking for another venture. But most people will be like, oh, wow, yeah, dude, that's amazing, man. Good for you. Yeah, let's talk about this. A pro salesperson would be like, dude, that's amazing. But what I'm not understanding is, I'm using a confused tone. What I'm not understanding is, why don't you just focus on your current business right now and blow that up even more instead of doing this? And that does a lot of things. First of all, you're gonna gain massive respect because most people would be like, no, just buy my shit. But instead you're kind of like pushing it away and making them defend why they wanna make a change. So that way you're not gonna get that objection at the end of the call saying, hey, no, I'm just gonna focus on my own business, right? So that's not enough though. You can build rapport throughout the whole conversation from beginning to end, but that's not enough to build massive amount of trust because the goal is not only for them to trust you, but to trust you to be an advisor that can help them get them to their goals. And the only way that's gonna happen is if you seem like an expert in your field. Right? To build rapport and seem like an expert in your field for them to actually trust you to help them get them to your goals. All right? And I'll tell you how not to seem like an expert is by doing what we talked about earlier, right? the more you talk about hobbies and sports, whether anything that does not pertain to the conversation, you are just undermining your expertise. They're going to take control of the conversation and you're not going to close, right? So an expert in your field. So what does that mean? You need to be sharp. There's a few things you can do. Well, mainly, active listening is one of the most important things that you could do to also build a lot more rapport, because you need to build rapport on a conscious level and a subconscious level, right? So conscious level is like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, good question. But a subconscious level, meaning like, there's something about this guy that I like, but I don't know what it is. And it's because of active listening, those little, yeah, I hear you. And not only that, but making them feel understood, making them feel heard. How do you do that? The best thing that you can do is when somebody telling you about the situation is to at least repeat back the last few words that you said so they know that you're actually listening. And that's one of the most important things that we do in sales, guys, is make our prospects feel like we're literally in the same shoes as them, right? Only then you can actually connect on a really deep level. And another thing that you can do, seem like an expert in your field, is have deep conviction in your voice when you're talking about your product and service, right? Have that confidence when you're explaining their products and showing them exactly how your product is going to take them from where they want to go to where they want to be, right? Because your product is the bridge, right? The solution where they are to where they want to go, right? And we can't build that bridge if we don't build trust in the first place. And that's the sweet spot in sales, guys. When expertise intersects with rapport, that's the sweet spot when a meaningful and a successful conversation actually happens. All right, and as promised, guys, I'm gonna show you exactly how I immediately build rapport in the first 3 seconds of a call, and it's very simple, these three steps. I say, hey, name with a question mark. Do not say, hey, is this John? Because now you just sound like a telemarketer. So say, hey, name, and how's it going? 9 times out of 10, they're gonna ask you back, how are you? And I'll tell you why in a second. And then you're gonna seem like you're booked and busy and having an amazing day, and that's how you're gonna pre-frame the call. And it goes something like this. Hey, Matthew, this is Rome with XYZ. How's it going? I'm doing good. How are you? Dude, I am feeling amazing. I'm booked and busy, living the dream. And then you just get into conversation. And when you do it this way, guys, when you build a rapport like this, you sound exactly the opposite of any other salesperson, and that alone is gonna make you stand out and put a smile on their face and most likely end up on a sales. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Okay, so guys, this is gonna be a pretty short video. I wanna talk about diffusing objections, okay? And when I think about diffusing objections, let me tell you exactly what I mean. So throughout your sales call, you're having a conversation with a prospect, and oftentimes they'll tell you like something along the lines, let's just say we're selling an e-commerce coaching program. They'll tell you like, yeah, I tried e-commerce before, it didn't really work out, or I tried e-commerce before and I didn't really see any results with it, so I'm not sure about it. So really what I want you to take from that is not only the context, but what does it actually mean? In order for you to understand that, I want you to really consciously think about the fact that what people say is not actually what they mean, right? And again, on a deeper level than that, what people say is just surface level, right? There's generally a deeper meaning, right? So I want you to be able to extrapolate. So if somebody says, hey, I tried e-commerce before and it didn't really work out, how can we extrapolate that? What we could do is we could think, hey, this person tried e-commerce before, it didn't really work out for them, which means that they're probably skeptical, they're not sure if it's gonna work, they have some hesitancy, right? Now we don't have to vocalize that to them, but I want you to be able to extrapolate that and understand that oftentimes they might tell you that, and then later, that's gonna be the objection that you get. Because the easiest way to handle an objection is prevent it from coming up in the first place. Because after you drop the price of 10 grand, 15 grand, 5,000 bucks even, even a couple thousand, it doesn't make a difference. All people are thinking about after you drop the price is the price, okay? And you could be great at handling objections, but no matter what, it'll be a lot easier if you diffuse objections before they actually come up. So how do we actually do that? Okay, number one, we have to understand what the actual objection is, okay? So if somebody's telling you, hey, look, I tried it before, didn't really work out, What does that tell you? Does that necessarily tell you that, or does that tell you anything at all about the money, for example? No, maybe they have the money, but they might be later scared to invest it because there's a lack of certainty in results. Now, why is there a lack of certainty in results? You might have the best program in the world, but maybe there's a lack of belief in e-commerce or the opportunity as a whole. Number one, the what is extrapolate. Extrapolate the objection. So you have to listen to what they're telling you and be able to understand what that objection is turning into, right? So whether it's skepticism, whether it's a lack of belief in the industry, whether it's a lack of belief in the opportunity, whether it's potentially a risk tolerance thing. Maybe they don't have a lot of money, so their risk tolerance is low. Maybe it's a lack of certainty in the outcome that might come later, not no matter how good your program is, but simply because they don't believe in it, right? So really understand, like, what is gonna be the real objection? What is gonna be the objection that comes later from what they're telling you? Oftentimes this will be up here. This will be mental. Actually, you know what? I'll talk about 3 right now, and then we'll come back to 2. You have to understand that there's different types of objections, right? There's beliefs and there's conditions, right? So what's the difference? Beliefs, okay? Beliefs are internal. Conditions are external, right? So what's an example of condition, right? Condition is not having money, right? Now, so generally conditions are like a physical thing, whereas beliefs are a mental thing, right? So conditions, let's go over a couple examples here. Money. Not having a lot of money to invest, okay? Next thing is time, which could also be a belief thing, right? So if somebody tells you, you know, they're working 70 hours a week, yeah, maybe they don't have the time to start a business, but time could also be a belief thing, right? Maybe somebody's telling you, hey, I work full time at a 9 to 5, so I don't really have the time. But really, they could get started part-time. They just don't know that. It's a false belief that they have. It's a misunderstanding, right? So time could be both. Money, I would say, could be both as well. You know, might not understand the business model. They might think they need hundreds of thousands of dollars when really they could start with, you know, $5,000. So it could be a belief thing as well, but generally money, I would say, would be conditioned. Let's go over another couple examples for belief. Outcome. So belief in outcome. If they don't believe e-commerce works as a whole, you have to figure out why, okay? Which will come back to root cause, it's all connected, okay? So if there's a lack of certainty in outcome, that's a mental thing. If they don't believe they have the skills, well, I mean, you gotta learn the skills, right? Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, you think he knew everything about how he's gonna, you know, build a trillion-dollar business now? No, right? So that's also belief, right? Hey, I don't know if I could do this, right? If I could do this, right? So that's a mental thing, a mental block, right? So you have to understand, like, what are you really diffusing, right? If it's a belief thing, you have to raise belief level, right? But a lot of people, where they mess up when it comes to raising belief level, they don't actually take the time to ask deeper questions and understand what belief they actually need to raise. Is it belief in outcome? Is it belief in themselves? Is it belief in their abilities? Is it their belief in the business model, right? So you have to understand what belief level you actually have to elevate. When it comes to conditions, right? Like, hey, you know, I started e-commerce, but I didn't have money. Gotcha, okay. Are you at a position now where you could put the resources together to have the money, right? So you're never gonna ask straight up, hey, do you have the money now? Because they'll probably, first of all, tell you no. And second of all, you're implying that the only way they could do this is, you know, coming up with $5,000 cash rather than potentially using credit cards or, you know, getting resourceful or working a little bit overtime to come up with the money, right? So when it comes to diffusing objections, and by the way, generally speaking, the challenges you're gonna get early in the call, the objections that would have later come up, 90% of the time are their beliefs and not conditions, right? So really take the time to understand what is the belief that you have to raise in order for you to avoid the objection from coming up later. Next thing right here is root cause. So what is the root cause of the limiting belief, okay? Again, 90% of the time, 80% of the time, objections that you come later simply come from limiting beliefs that people have. Okay, so you want to find out why somebody has a limiting belief in order to be able to address it and change it, right? So if somebody has a limiting belief, I want you to understand that most people aren't just like always skeptical. Some people are like that, but generally speaking, there's a root cause, right? Root cause, for example, why somebody's skeptical. Maybe their parents told them that the only way to make money is go to school. Or maybe they tried something before and it failed. So now they have this limiting belief that it won't work because it didn't work for them once. So really identify like what is the root cause of the limiting belief in order to be able to do 3, address it, right? So I'll give you an example. I asked the prospect a question like, have you tried e-commerce before? They said, yeah, man, I've tried it. It really didn't work out for me. I'm not sure if it's for me, okay? You can't just leave it at that because that's gonna be an objection that comes later down the road. So it's not for me, okay? How would I handle that? Gotcha, okay, totally understand. And Mr. Prospect, let me ask you, when you say it's not really for you, like what do you really mean by that, right? I'm gonna dig deeper in a curious tone. And they're gonna tell me, I tried it before, it just didn't really work out. I didn't really get any sales. Okay, I understand. And when you say you didn't really get any sales, do you think maybe was it like a marketing issue, or was it like your products just weren't any good? Like, why do you think that happened? Why do you think it went that way? Well, it went that way because I was kind of all alone, right? I didn't really know what I was doing. Okay, gotcha. So let me ask you, if you had somebody, for example, to guide you, or if you had the resources to do X, Y, and Z, do you think that would maybe potentially help, right? So again, you're not bringing up your product specifically, but you're addressing their limiting belief, right? And let's say it's a skill thing, like, hey, I don't know, I'm not really a tech savvy person, right? Okay, I understand. And let me ask you, we have different kinds of people in our program. Do you understand that, like, for you to succeed in e-commerce, you don't really need to be like a coder, right? Like, some people might have this like misconception that for them to succeed in e-commerce, they have to have like crazy tech skills and be able to code all sorts of stuff, right? So again, find out what the root cause is and why they have these beliefs in the first place in order to be able to diffuse them from coming up later, right? I want you to understand, just because somebody tells you, hey, it's money or it's time, I didn't, have the skill, doesn't mean it's true. Most of the time, the objections that you'll get early in the call are actually limiting beliefs. And in order for you to be able to raise the limiting beliefs, you have to identify the root cause, okay? In order to be able to increase and elevate belief level, you have to understand, is it really just is it a belief level, or is it a condition, right? Like a conditional thing, a circumstantial thing, right? And then either tell them a story or give them an analogy, or tell them whatever it is that they need to hear in order for you to raise the belief level when it comes to the limiting belief. You'll get these a lot, totally normal. Make sure you're really listening to what they're saying under the surface. Not only what they say, but how they say it too, their tonality, all that kind of stuff. Because what people say isn't always what they mean, right? Dig beyond the surface level, okay? I hope this one helps. Okay, so you're on a call, you're speaking to a prospect, you just started the conversation, you're asking them a couple questions, and they say, John, can you just tell me what you got to offer? Could you just tell me about your program? Could you tell me all about it? We hear it all the time, right? And typically, this happens, before I tell you how to address it, which I already kind of wrote up here, I want you to understand why it's happening, and so that you're able to adjust, right? So possibly the prospect that you're speaking to feels like they're being sold, right? They feel like you're being salesy, right? Which might be happening. So make sure that, you're taking this into account. If the prospect feels like you're being a little bit salesy with them, they're gonna give you that resistance and try to just get to the deliverables of the program. They're not gonna wanna talk to you because they feel like they're being sold. People love buying, but they hate being sold, right? So make sure you don't sound salesy. That's the most kind of important piece of advice there, number one. And then number two, when they're trying to just get to the deliverables, another thing that it could mean is that you're slowing down the call too much, right? Oftentimes I hear people speaking a fast-paced prospect as if they're slow-paced, asking all these like unnecessary questions, when really you should just let them go. Don't cage them in, right? Now, that's not always the case, but I want you to consider, right, when somebody, tries to get you off track and just get to the presentation, think about it, because it might be something that you're doing that makes them feel like they're being sold and they just want to get to the program, right? That's not always the case. Some people, just want to get to it, take you off track, but always consider what people do and, try and use it as feedback for yourself. Now, in terms of like, what do you actually do when somebody says, can we just get to the program? Can you just tell me all about it? First thing is you got to maintain composure, right? Definitely don't go straight to the program. Okay. You bend over backwards for your prospect, you lose authority. Okay. So number one is maintain composure. Number two, I want you to understand that, listen, if you're skipping all the questions, if you're not gathering information, understanding your prospect, understanding their needs, you're doing them a disservice. So I want you to understand that. Don't go right to the presentation. Diffuse what they just told you, reframe it, and then continue on with your presentation. So it'll sound something like this. Hey, Bob, can we just get to that? Can we just get to the program, man? I just tell me what you have to offer. Hey, John, listen, man, I totally understand. I'm very happy that you want to hear more about the program and that you're excited. I love your energy, okay? I just diffused it. I neutralized it. But if I just sat here, man, told you about all of our, all the things our program has to offer without me actually knowing that I could support you and that this would make sense for you, I would be doing you a disservice. In fact, if I just sat here and told you about the program, even if you were ready to get started without any questions, I wouldn't be doing a good job here today, because I want to make sure that what we're offering in our program will actually get you to your goals, okay? So reframe and then continue. So, John, is it okay if I just ask you a few more questions so that I can really make sure that what we have going on here at ABC Academy is exactly what you need for you to see results? And, if it's somebody who maybe took a program in the past, I would say something more specific to them, like, John, I would hate for this to go like the last program did, where you didn't see any results. And frankly, I have no way of making sure that doesn't happen if I don't have complete certainty that our program is going to help you. And there's no way for me to do that without me asking a couple questions and really just understanding your situation a little bit more. So is that okay, John? Can I take a couple more minutes here, just ask a couple questions? I promise I won't make this longer than it needs to be. So again, diffuse, reframe, right? And then continue into the call, right? But most important thing is, which I see oftentimes, you got to maintain your composure. I see people, who are just starting in sales. Somebody says, hey, could you tell me about your program? And then what happens? They skip their entire framework and present their deliverables, which is a big no-no, okay? Can't do that. You can't lose composure, you can't lose frame, you can't let a prospect get you off track. That's why it's super important to practice, so that when situations like that come around, you're not looking for words, you're not stuck. You know exactly how to handle it. Very simple. Diffuse, reframe, and continue forward with the call, okay? That's what you guys got to do when your prospect is rushing you to the presentation, okay? I hope that helps, guys. Okay, let's talk about choosing pain points. Oftentimes, you're going to be on a sales call asking discovery, and situational based questions, and you're going to get your prospect to sometimes tell you a few different things that they might be struggling with, a few different pain points, right? Sometimes they might tell you, they don't make a lot of money, right? They might tell you they work a lot of hours, and they might tell you, because they work a lot of hours and because they don't really get, make the money that they want to be making, as a result of that, they don't get to spend as much time that they would like with their family or their friends, their loved ones in general. They give you a few different pain points, okay? And ultimately, you're sitting there stuck, what should I focus on, right? Which are the pain points, right? Because generally, you don't want to dig deep on all the pain points, right? You have to pick maybe one or two. In this video, I want to help you better understand how to choose what pain points to dig on. The first thing I want to tell you is that the first pain point that you get is generally not the most important one, right? So if somebody tells you, hey, dude, I don't make enough money, that's generally not going to be their most important pain point, right? Because, hey, look, if they were making, more money, but certain other components of their lives didn't change, that wouldn't necessarily solve the problem, right? That's number one. Number two, I want you to understand that with every problem, in everyone's situation, there's a certain, situation they're in, and then there's also the root cause, the root problem, right? So I want you to understand that, look, sales is really bridging a gap between where somebody is and where they want to be. Just because somebody is going through a certain circumstance or certain situation, that doesn't mean that the outcome that you're going to sell them will actually solve the root cause and the root problem that they're dealing with. For example, if somebody, is spending a ton of hours at work because they're, not making, their hourly rate is low, you solving their problem, not making enough money, for example, that in and of itself is not enough, right? That alone is still surface level, right? So your solution has to solve the root cause of their problems, number one, but number two, it has to solve the outcome / circumstance. A big part of this is also positioning, right? So you have to be able to position your program as the solution. Now, obviously, we can't make any guarantees. Like, we can't tell people they're going to make any amount of money, right? Even if they tell us their goal is 20 grand a month, you can't tell them, hey, look, our program will get you there, right? That's, first of all, that's not compliant. And second of all, that's just not the right way to sell. But you want to make sure that the pain point you're choosing solves two things. It solves the root cause of their problems. And then number two, also will fix their end goal, end outcome and the circumstances, okay? The third thing I want you to consider when choosing, what pain point is the tone. Listen to their tonality. So if somebody tells you, hey man, I'm just not making enough money, versus, look, I don't make enough money, and as a result, I have to work all these hours, and as a result of that, I don't really get to spend time with my kids. The tonality there is very different, right? From someone just saying, hey man, I just don't make enough money, right? So listen to tone. When you hear somebody's tone talking about spending time with their kids, or, having the ability to travel, or, whatever their end goal is, their tonality will sound a lot more concerned, because whatever it is that they're telling you is a lot more important to them, right? So when you're choosing a pain point, number one, make sure that the pain point you're choosing is really the problem, number one. And then number two, make sure that it's really the most important thing, right? So generally the first thing that people will tell you is not going to be the most important. You have to dig a little bit deeper, right? And make sure that you tie things together, right? So if somebody tells you, hey, it's time, and it's not having time with my, time to do things I want, and time with my kids, and money, really you have to tie it all together. Potentially, if their hourly rate increased, for example, or their efficiency, they wouldn't have to work so many hours, and then as a result, they'd be able to spend time with their kids. So what would the root problem be? The root problem there is that their hourly is so low. So they need to make more for the time that they are working, right? They need to have more leverage, for example, in building a business that could potentially get them there eventually. Obviously, again, we cannot guarantee that on the sales calls, and in life, generally, you can't guarantee results in starting a business, right? 99% of startups fail, or 95%, whatever the number is. But make sure that you're tying together the root problem, the root cause that you're solving, and you're gonna hopefully bridge the gap in their head with your program, and make sure you're listening to their tone to really find out what is important, what's the most important thing to them. Okay, so that's how you choose a pain point. Focus on those three things, and it should be pretty easy once you, especially when you start listening to their tonality, should be pretty easy to find out what's the most important to them. All right. Okay guys, so very important lesson today that I'm gonna go over with you guys. Some of you guys have requested this lesson, and I talked about storytelling in the past. I've done a couple of videos, but it seems like there's a couple elements that are still missing, right? There's a few elements that make stories effective. First of all, the story in and of itself, right? Obviously, it has to be a good story that people can resonate for it to do the job, for it to be effective, right? Also, the placement of the story, right? So you can't just throw around stories randomly on the sales calls. You have to be strategic. Otherwise, again, they're going to lose value, right? And then how you actually tell the stories and what points of the story you focus on. Now, I've done another video on hero's journey. I might do one today as well. But really, the key thing with stories is understanding the purpose, the end result that you're looking for with the story, right? The outcome that you want. And the outcome is different with every single sales call, right? Because everybody comes from a different walk of life. Everyone comes from a different past. Everyone has different values. So at the end of the day, your stories with every single prospect that you speak to are going to be different. So let's talk about storytelling. First, we're going to talk about what makes an effective story. Then we're going to talk about the placement of the stories. And then we're going to talk about tailoring your stories to the certain outcomes that you're looking for, okay? So I'm gonna put this up here. Story. Okay. Bye. Effective. 2 is going to be placement. 3. I'm trying to. Okay, so these are the 3 things that we're going to talk about right now. So let's get into the first one. What makes a story effective? Okay, you guys have probably been on sales calls before, and you're speaking to a salesperson. They tell you a story, and you're kind of just sitting there and listening, and you're like, okay, and you don't feel connected, right? The reason you don't feel connected is because the emotions that they're creating through the story that they're telling you might not resonate with you, okay? So that's the first thing. Now, maybe they're not creating any emotion whatsoever in the story, but that's even worse. But typically speaking, the biggest mistake that I see people make when they're telling stories is they're not actually connecting to the right emotion, right? So what do I mean by that? There's really a few different core emotions, especially in the biz op market where we're selling coaching, on real estate, on e-commerce, on all sorts of business opportunities, make money stuff. There's 3 things that people feel before they take action, right? 3 kind of core emotions, we'll call it. So number 1, helplessness. Actually, we'll call it 2. For the purposes of this video specifically. There's another one, I watched this video, someone kind of talked about this. Another one is often worthless, but I'd say that more so applies in like the personal development, fitness markets more than biz op. But for biz op stuff, most of what, or not necessarily most, but a lot of what we sell, these are the kind of 2 things that people feel. Right, so before they're starting an e-commerce business or before they're starting to invest in real estate, oftentimes people feel one of these 2 things, right? They feel either helpless or they feel hopeless. Now, what's the difference? Let's talk about helpless, right? Potentially they've tried it before, right? They tried whatever it is that you're selling before. It didn't go very well. And they felt that they had nobody to speak to. They felt that they had nobody to kind of hold their hand and guide them, just like you guys who are in my coaching. You get my guidance, you get my team's guidance. We're there, we're holding your hand, right? Pretend you were trying to get into sales or, remote closing, whatever it is, and you didn't have my help, right? Nobody was there to teach you how to build rapport. Nobody was there to teach you how to build trust and build authority and, do objection handling, for example, right? You would probably feel pretty helpless, right? You would feel like you're all alone, right? So oftentimes, this is what people feel before they start taking action, right? And then the other one is hopeless. Now, hopelessness generally comes after defeat, right? So if I tried, let's just say, an e-commerce business, right? I started drop shipping and that didn't go well for me, and I spent a bunch of money and I tested a bunch of products, selling products online, or if I got into real estate and I did a couple deals and they didn't go well and I lost money or I struggled with financing, oftentimes people will feel hopeless or helpless. Those are kind of the 2 core emotions that people generally feel before start taking action. Now, you see this a lot in fitness and personal development as well, but another one that you'll see a lot in the personal development space is the worthless. Back to storytelling. In order for your stories to be effective, people need to feel that the story you're telling them resonates with them, right? So you have to make sure that while you're telling the story, you're connecting to the core emotions that somebody feels right now or felt before they started. Maybe, they're on the call with you and they already started and they took action, but you have to make sure that the core emotion that they felt before taking action, or right now, even specifically, depending on where they're at in that cycle, right? Maybe they're just researching whatever business model, maybe they've already done a little bit of research and are starting to take action. Whatever the case is, you have to make sure that you show them in the storyline that you understand how they feel, okay? And that's something that a lot of people kind of mess up, right? They tell stories about, oh, I did this or John did that, but really, we all know that people make decisions on emotion, right? Not logic, right? So telling people, John did this or John did that, very similar, right? Points of commonality alone are not what generate good stories. They're not what generate a spike in emotion and desire when you're telling effective stories. What does generate that is really connecting with people's emotions, right? So I want you to understand these two, core emotions, because you're going to see them very often. In your storyline, which you guys should know the storyline from the Hero's Journey video, it's essentially the kind of key points in the storyline that you should focus on. I want you to understand that really what you should be doing is showing people you understand how they feel, okay? The next component of effective storytelling is placement. So where do we actually bring these stories in? Like, should you be talking about stories right in situational based questions, right in the discovery? When you just started the conversation, should you be waiting till you're talking about goals with your prospect? Should you be telling them only in objection handling? Here's the thing, the answer is not really as black and white. I know a lot of you guys watch these videos and you want like, only tell stories here, only tell stories there, but really it's not like that, right? And the reason it's not like that is because people will feel different emotions throughout the sales calls depending on what kind of buyer they are. If they're a move away buyer, they're getting out of the pain. If they're a move toward buyer, right? So I'm gonna tell you, the general rule of thumb of when you should be giving stories, okay? Number one is to re-engage, right? Oftentimes, we're asking questions on a sales call and your prospect, you'll notice that they might not feel totally connected, right? You ask them, what do you do? Tell me about this, tell me about that. You get into vision, you ask them their goals. You're in discovery and you may feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect. So to reel the prospect in and really get that conversation to a higher frequency where it's no longer just questions, Q&A. What you want to do is tell a story that will increase their emotion, right? Spike potentially their dopamine, or not necessarily dopamine, depends on what the story's about, right? But spike their emotion overall based on, these things here, and increase that level on which you guys are connected, right? So it's no longer, salesperson or coach and prospect, but it's more this person trying to help me and we're really understanding each other, right? So that's kind of one of the first things, right? Tell a story to re-engage. I was doing a Zoom call the other day, or Misha was actually doing a Zoom call and I popped in and I was telling this story. We're hiring a couple people right now for operations within our company, and I got tired of looking for people. Like I was, browsing through Indeed and Upwork and all this stuff, and I just got tired of it, right? So what I did is I went on Upwork and I found a headhunter, or I found a few headhunters, okay? And when I was interviewing these headhunters, to hire them full-time so that they're constantly able to, find talent for us, I was on a call with two gentlemen back to back, okay? One guy's name was Eric and the other one, I don't remember his name. But both of them were really, really solid, really sharp guys. And I had a third interview coming up with another lady, her name was Christina. And the first two calls went relatively well. It seemed like they had an amazing resume. They've done recruiting work for huge companies, amazing resume, good dudes. Like they really seemed to understand what I want, which was great. And at that point I was like, well, we're probably gonna hire one of these two. I told Antonio, who's our COO, I'm like, we're probably gonna hire one of these people. So, should we just cancel the third interview? And we decided, you know what? It's fine. Let's just do the third interview and see how it goes. So we got on a call with Christina, just asking the same questions. Who are we looking for? What kind of talent? Blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, out of nowhere, she starts telling me this story about how she used to work directly with a CEO of a company, somewhat similar to mine actually. He runs a digital marketing and consulting agency, and he tried finding a lot of people, and it was annoying. But more importantly than it being annoying, the problem is the amount of time it took, right? Scrolling through resumes, conducting these interviews, and she really understood from the questions that she was asking me, the pain points for me, which were the time, right? That's more important to me than anything. So she really understood that, and she told me this story, and towards the end, I realized, holy shit, this girl understood my problem and my pain point on a such higher level than these other two guys. So even though they had this great resume and I was actually thinking to go ahead with them, I realized wow, they didn't really understand what I didn't want. And what I didn't want is to be conducting interviews all day long, right? I want somebody to be able to, be able to make it more hands-off for me. And ultimately I ended up going with Christina, who's actually the most expensive. Her fee was the highest compared to the other two, because I knew that I'm gonna have the best time working with her, because she understands that I want somebody who's gonna make it absolutely headache-free, minimal time involvement for me. And we started working with her, and that's exactly what I'm getting, right? So not only did she tell an effective story, but it showed me that she's the person that I want to work with because she understands my needs better than the others do, right? And that all came from effective placement of a story. In regards to placement, again, first thing is we want to re-engage. Number two is showing the prospects that we understand. Show, understand. Okay. So essentially, show understanding and deeper connection. Okay. So she felt on the call that it was a good time to put in a story, because she could tell that, look, at the end of the day, they all had great resumes, but she showed me that she really understood what my pains are. And by telling that story, I could see wow, she really understands. She gets it, right? So that's another important component when it comes to the placement of effective stories, right? You got to place them at, it can be random, right? It has to be another time where you can tell effective stories is when you feel that your prospect logically, understands that, hey, this makes sense for them, this is a good decision to make, they're ready to go ahead, but really taking it a deeper level and showing that we truly understand their pain point. Right now, you don't always have to do this, but she probably noticed in that interview that we conducted with her, I already spoke to a couple of people, right? Logically, you all had a great resume. It's really, who do I like the most? And then she took it a level deeper by showing me she understands the pain point that I had, and really built that deeper connection with her, right? With me and her, by telling an effective story and comparing it to what somebody else goes through, right? Another thing that a lot of people don't understand is that not all your stories have to be about yourself. It could be a past client, it could be a family member, it could be a sibling, it could be another prospect you even spoke to, even if they didn't move forward, right? So it really just depends on what the story is about, but it doesn't always have to be about you. So that's kind of what makes stories effective. That's where you should place stories, right? There's not like a one-size-fits-all answer. I can tell you, always tell a story in situation-based question. Always tell a story in vision-based question. I'll tell you where you shouldn't tell stories. Where a lot of people mess up is they tell stories before gathering enough information. They use stories as kind of a bailout because they feel like, hey, I'm not really building rapport. Let me just throw in a story. That's not what stories do. Okay, and that's something a lot of people I see mess up all the time. They tell a story 2 seconds or 2 minutes into discovery, and I'm like, well, you haven't really understood the pain point, so how can you be telling an effective story? And obviously their stories aren't effective. If we go back to the example here with Christina, she told me this story, I think it was like 15 minutes into the call, because she really understood my situation, and the context made her understand what exactly I'm looking for and trying to avoid, so that she could tell an effective story. It's not the other way around. You don't just tell stories in an effort to just build more trust. You have to already have some level of rapport and context in order to be able to tell a good story that people can relate to, right? So don't just tell stories for the sake of telling stories and trying to go deeper. It won't work. Another thing when it comes to placement, right? Vulnerability, okay? A lot of times we'll talk to a prospect, not a lot, but I would say maybe 20% of the time you'll talk to a prospect who's pretty closed off. You ask them a question, they're giving you a little bit of a dry response, like a girl you just met who doesn't want to talk to you. You ask her, you ask her questions about, you know, what she's got going on. She gives you one-word answers, right? That's sometimes what you get from prospects who are a little bit closed off. They're not closed off just because they want to be closed off, right? Like if they go talk to their best friend or their mom or their dad or whatever it is, they're not always like that, right? So what makes the difference, right? Well, the difference, if you think about it, if they're talking to their, you know, friend or their best friend or their parent or whatever it is, they trust them more and they feel comfortable around them, right? They feel okay to display vulnerability, right? Now, if you want your prospect to be vulnerable with you, you got to get a little bit vulnerable with them. So sometimes we could throw in a story if you feel the conversation's a little bit dry and the responses are dry because you feel that your prospect isn't quite comfortable enough yet. You could throw in a quick story there. It doesn't have to have the whole hero's journey like often you know, other stories do and most stories do. But if you want to tell them a quick story, you know, 30 seconds, a minute or two, that will make them feel more comfortable and show your vulnerability in order for them to feel comfortable getting vulnerable with you, there's also a good time, right? And this will often be in the earlier stages of the call, right? You don't want to have a conversation where you're getting one-word answers and then only towards the end, you're like, okay, let me get vulnerable. There's no point. You know, you already messed up, right? So this is more effective at the early stages of the call. Okay, so that's kind of the second component, placement. And then the third component is outcome. You have to understand what the outcome is of your story, right? Oftentimes the outcome depends on what the core emotion is that they're feeling, right? So if they feel helpless, perhaps the story you're telling them is in an effort to make them feel like, hey, you have the support that you're looking for, right? Or, you know, somebody else came into the program, they had a similar experience, they felt like they, you know, had no help, they had nobody to talk to, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't happen in our program, right? For instance, right? You have to understand what the outcome is on every call. Oftentimes people start telling stories, and I hear this all the time, and then I ask them, well, John, when I'm giving them feedback, what was the point of this story? What were you hoping in terms of the outcome? Oftentimes they'll tell me, you know, just build more rapport or do this or do that. That's fine sometimes, but ultimately there has to be a certain outcome in mind for these stories, right? So, you know, are you telling the story in an effort to make them feel like, hey, you have help? Is it a story you're telling them to make them feel like, hey, it's important to be persistent? That's kind of a labeling thing, right? So like, what are you telling them these stories for? A lot of people forget to, you know, think about the outcome they're looking for, and their stories lose direction a little bit, and, you know, they become too long or whatever the case is. So really consider, like, what is the outcome you're going for on the story you're telling, right? Is it show vulnerability? If that's what it is, then cut out the fluff and just show them how you were vulnerable in a certain situation, right? If it's, you know, building that deeper connection, focus on that, right? So Christina did a really good job. She didn't, you know, tell me, I don't remember the CEO's name that she was talking about, but call him Bob. She didn't tell me Bob's whole life story, right? She told me Bob was recruiting for an executive assistant. He interviewed over 60 people, and none of them were quite the fit. Some had technical skill, but were a little bit too introverted for his liking, or, you know, whatever the case is, right? So really understand the outcome that you're looking for, and make sure that your story has the direction. You're constantly moving in the right direction with the story to achieve that outcome. I say the same thing about your sales calls as a whole. If the needle is not moving forward, it's moving backwards. But on a more microscopic level, it's the same thing for stories. If your stories are just like fluff, context, without actually just really focusing on the emotion or, you know, the outcome that we're looking for with the stories, they become meaningless, right? If your story could have been, you know, punchy and you could have told the whole story in 2 minutes, and you sat there telling this prospect for 10 minutes, they're going to forget about really the important stuff. You know, if you keep dragging it out, they're going to forget that, the outcome, right? And what you're really trying to show them, kind of lose attention as well. Okay. So these are kind of the three biggest things that I would focus on. So this is what kind of makes a story effective. Okay. This is the placement, right? So when you should be telling these stories. And the third thing to consider is like really think about the outcome, right? Don't just tell stories for the sake of telling stories, but really understand the outcome that you're going for when you're telling these stories in order for them to be effective. Okay, that's all for storytelling. Hopefully that helps you guys and your stories will become more effective. Peace. Okay, let's talk about urgency. And before I tell you what urgency is and how to build urgency, it's very important that I tell you what urgency is not. Because oftentimes I hear people come into my program or people who have all this so-called sales experience and they were never really taught what urgency is. So let me bust a couple myths first, and then I'll tell you how to actually build urgency. Okay, so let's talk about what urgency is not. And oftentimes, it's funny, all these guys who say they have sales experience, they talk about the same thing. It's these three words that come to mind, but really those kind of misconceptions are useful in some context, but definitely not on sales calls. And you know what, before I tell you what those things are, let me tell you what the real difference between building urgency is and actually, or how a professional builds urgency and how an amateur does, right? Oftentimes you hear amateurs, who might have a lot of experience in sales. That doesn't necessarily mean they're good, but you hear them oftentimes saying things like, hey, we only got 5 spots left, or hey, we have this fast action discount, you gotta act now. And you've been in that situation, you see it all the time. You've probably been on sales calls and you heard somebody say it to you, and I want you to ask yourself, how does that make you feel? Okay? Because I want you guys to sell the way that you would like to be sold to. If somebody gets on a sales call with you and says something that creates like a weird feeling for you, creates like this forceful energy that nobody likes, don't do it on your sales calls, right? So the real difference between professional and an amateur when it comes to creating urgency is that an amateur applies pressure, okay? And a professional creates urgency. So what is pressure? Pressure is the external feeling, like, hey, Matt, you gotta act now. Or hey, Matt, there's only 5 spots left. Or hey, Matt, if you do this tomorrow, the price is gonna go up. It's only $5,000 today, tomorrow's gonna be 6, right? First of all, you're lying to your prospects, number one. Number two, which I can never stand behind. And number two, it creates this internal feeling like, it creates this friction where like, people wanna distance themselves from you, right? So what urgency is not, it's not scarcity, okay? What urgency is not pressure. It's not scarcity, pressure, fast action, we'll call it incentives. This is what urgency is not, okay? And if you ever find yourself doing this on your sales calls, creating this like weird false scarcity, like, hey, there's only 3 spots, or hey this, or hey that. If you find yourself doing this on sales calls, creating this fake scarcity, applying this pressure, I want you to stop doing it immediately. If you haven't noticed, it does not work, okay? And more importantly, your prospects will not like it and they won't like you, okay? So even if for whatever reason, they were right at the edge, and it pushes them over the edge and they do get started, they'll remember you as a high pressure, annoying salesperson, which nobody likes, okay? So now that we know what urgency is not, let's talk about what it is and how to actually build it a lot more importantly, okay? Number one, I want you to understand urgency is a feeling, it is not a state. Okay? So people feel the need to take action. People feel the need to get out of their situation. People feel the need to get started. People they're not in a constant state of urgency, right? I personally operate in like a constant state of urgency, but that's how I am in general. When it comes to sales calls, right, it's a feeling, okay? It's not a state, okay? So you have to generate the feeling of wanting to take action, right? We know there's 2 types of buyers. There's the move away and there's move towards, right? The move away are people trying to get out of a certain pain point, right? If somebody's broke, busted, and disgusted, they're trying to get out of that situation, right? So identify okay, so identify the type of buyer. Are they a move away buyer? Are they a move towards buyer? When you know the type of buyer they are, you know what you need to do to amplify that feeling of urgency. All urgency is a high desire to take action on either getting out of a certain pain point or getting into a certain goal, right? So if somebody's a move away buyer, they're trying to get out of being broke, busted, and disgusted and working 70 hours a week so that they could spend time with their family, what you're gonna do is you're gonna build the gap. How do we build the gap? By asking good questions. You guys already know this. We're gonna build the gap as much as possible to amplify the desire to get out of a certain situation, which is their pain point, right? If it's a move towards prospect, right? If somebody's trying to make as much money in order to be able to have the freedom to travel with their family, for example, you're gonna ask questions that build a gap to generate that result, right? The FOMO of not getting that result, right? Fear of missing out on potential opportunity, potential to travel and spend time with family, blah, 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 blah. And then if it's a move away prospect, again, the fear of being stuck in that situation and never getting out, right? That's how urgency is built. Urgency is built by asking questions that widen the gap between where somebody is and where they want to be. You guys probably know the questions you should be asking, but really I want you to focus on amplifying the desired end result or amplifying the potential of not getting to that end result. And if it's a move away buyer, staying in the situation they're currently in, which probably fucking sucks. That's why they're a move away buyer. So none of what we say is you have to do this now or we only have 5 spots left or this. That's all pressure. That's a feeling that creates this friction internally that makes you want to distance yourself from the salesperson. What we do is we ask good questions that create the feeling of shit, I gotta take action now. I gotta take action on this opportunity so that I don't have to stay in the same situation I'm in, or so that I don't miss out on potentially being able to do, X, Y, and Z, whatever their goals are. Okay, so I really want you guys to understand that difference. Stop applying pressure and start creating urgency by asking good questions, building a gap, a big gap, and then amplifying desire, okay? I did a coaching call on this, which goes a little bit deeper, but really I want you to understand this. This is the foundation of building urgency. And that internal feeling is what's gonna get people to actually take action rather than, just ending calls on a follow-up, okay? I hope that helps. This is a very important concept. If you guys are currently doing this, cut it out ASAP. It doesn't work. It makes people upset with you. And more importantly, it's never gonna pay your commissions, okay? This will, okay? Create that internal feeling, increase the gap, widen the gap, and amplify their desire by asking good questions, okay? I hope that helps. Okay, let's talk about your tonality on your sales calls, and more specifically, your energy and enthusiasm on your sales calls. At this point, you probably, watch my other videos on tonality. The tonality is always changing. That we mirror our prospects depending on how their voice is. You probably watch some videos on the inflection at different points in the call. What I really want to focus on in this video right here is your energy levels and enthusiasm levels and how they, change depending on what step you are in the call. And obviously, it changes based on the type of prospect you're speaking to and what they're telling you in the context, of course. But let me give you a kind of general outline of when you want to have higher energy and when you have a little bit lower, more contained enthusiasm, so that you guys have kind of a guideline on what to go off of, okay? And most of it is kind of logical if you break it down, but I'll go over it with you guys so you have this kind of guideline. So first things first is your introduction, okay? These are the 10 steps. You don't have a second chance to make a first impression, okay? So you want to come on with high energy, high enthusiasm. Now, you don't want to sound like crazy high energy because then you sound like a salesperson, but you also don't want to sound like somebody put a gun to your head, which is why you're on the call. right? So you want to have what we call a contained or constrained enthusiasm. So your enthusiasm's still high the way I'm talking right now, but you're not yelling on the call, okay? So your intro, overall enthusiasm, energy levels are pretty high, okay? Now, with our agenda, when we set the agenda, hey, what do we like to do on these calls? I'd like to ask you a few questions, get to know a bit about you, see if and how I can support you. You drop it a little bit from the introduction, right? But more importantly, at this point, I want you to really listen closely to how your prospect's communicating. So if in your intro, they're also like super high energy, this is gonna be up. If you hear that they're a bit of a lower energy person, you're gonna come down a little bit from introduction, okay? Those are the first two, pretty simple. Now let's go into situational based questions. In situational based questions, you're really taking the time to dig deep and understand somebody's pain points. If somebody's opening up about their pain points, about not spending much time with their family or financial struggles or time, and you're like all excited, enthusiastic, there's gonna be a disconnect. Think about it like this. Pretend, one of your friends, let's call her Tiffany, okay? Tiffany was in a relationship, okay? And Tiffany just broke up with her partner, right? With her boyfriend, let's say. Tiffany comes to you crying, all upset about her relationship, and you're like, don't worry about it, plenty of fish in the sea. She'll be like, you're such a douchebag, right? With situational, typically, because we're digging deep on people's pains, we wanna bring down the energy quite a bit and sound a lot more empathetic and caring rather than just all crazy energy, okay? Now, this especially with move away buyers when we're digging, and talking to them about their pain points. Now, vision-based is the opposite, right? When somebody's telling you about their goals, their why, they're excited, they wanna make a change, they wanna be able to travel, X, Y, and Z. Now we have to raise the tonality, okay? Or the energy we'll call it. We have to raise the energy. We gotta sound excited. They're excited about their goals. If you're not excited for them, what's gonna happen is they're gonna feel like, hey, this person doesn't really care about me. I'm telling him all about my goals and my dreams, and he's like caging me in, right? So again, you're adjusting very much, obviously, but generally this will be higher enthusiasm than situation. Challenges, it really just depends, right? Depends on if, again, we have limiting beliefs. They didn't succeed before. Again, if you're all like crazy energy, there's gonna be a disconnect, right? So really what I want you guys to understand, like just big picture, is focus, number one, on the context of what your prospect is telling you to be able to adjust, but also listen to their tonality very closely and their energy levels, right? That's kind of the easiest thing to notice, right? When it comes to tonality and matching and mirroring, it gets whole lot more complicated, right? We can pay attention to the types of words people use. Are they more complicated? Are they more simple? How do they structure their sentences? Understanding how people's thoughts are packaged up when they're speaking to you and matching that. But that's like all higher level stuff, which really isn't the biggest needle mover. The biggest needle mover is the energy, right? Being able to shift your energy. So challenge, we'll put this because it just depends. Consequential based questions, oftentimes we skip them, right? But again, if we are talking to a prospect and we say, hey, what happens if you don't take action? And they're telling you about how they would have to return or keep working their dreadful 9 to 5 and not spend time with their family and this, what do you guys think? I mean, given that we're going back to their pain points, transfers over here, again, it's a little bit lower. Showing the God gauge commitment, pretty neutral. Gauge commitment, so also usually pretty neutral. If you feel like their commitment level is a bit low and you're trying to motivate them a little bit to take action, then your energy would probably increase. Self-solution selling, neutral. When I say neutral, it's basically just mirroring wherever the prospect is. So neutral could generally be high. So this is what people probably think I'm talking about. That's not right. So it's not low, medium, high. It just depended on the prospect, right? So if your prospect is generally up here and, or throughout the call is up here, let's say most people are at this line, neutral, or at this line, we'll call it medium. What neutral state is in terms of tonality, if your prospect is here, that becomes your new neutral on these calls. If your prospect is here, that becomes your new neutral. So your neutral is wherever the prospect is, right? It's not neutral in the grand scheme of everyone communicating, right? Go back here. So again, neutral, presenting and close. So presenting, we'll break this down. Up. You got to be excited about whatever it is you're selling, okay? Again, it can be like a crackhead energy because then they won't trust you, number one, but it also, you can't sound like you're not excited about what you're selling because sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. If you don't transfer energy and you don't sound excited about what you're selling, your prospect won't get excited either. And if they're not excited about what it is that they're getting, I guarantee you they're not paying you at the end of the call. So that's presenting and then closing. We'll talk about dropping the price specifically. If you're dropping the price and you're like, hey, it's a one-time investment of $10,000, you sound like you're gonna take their money and run, okay? So this, again, has to be neutral, right? Right? So listen, in order for you to get started, you know, there's no monthly fees, no subscriptions. It's a one-time investment of $10,000, right? Again, the neutral level changes from prospect to prospect, but generally speaking, it's gonna be a little bit more contained, specifically when you're dropping the price. Otherwise, you're gonna sound like you're there to take their money and run, which is obviously not what we wanna come across as, and not what we wanna do at all, okay? So generally, let's draw it out. This is kind of like a general illustration. So let's start here. Intro is up, agenda is up, situational comes down a little bit, vision is up, challenge is here, consequential comes down, neutral, 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 neutral. For the most part, you'll have a little bit of fluctuation in here, but generally that's going to be pretty steady at that point in the call, okay? I hope that helps, guys. That's how your energy levels will kind of fluctuate throughout the call. And again, this is just an overall guideline, right? It depends on the prospect you're speaking to, what they're telling you, the context, their tonality, but this is kind of big picture what it should kind of look like, okay? I hope that one helps. See you guys.
Have you ever guys wondered why sales is the highest paid profession in the world? Why people go on and make hundreds of thousands of dollars in the first few years? Because they're willing to do what most people won't. Because this is how the sales journey actually looks like for everybody. And if you're willing to go through all these lows, then guess what's gonna happen? You're gonna get paid because of that, right? And the reason why there's so many lows is because these are all learning experiences. And instead of you taking it as a discouragement, right? These guys at the top took that and made every negative into a positive, right? Because you need to have the right frame of mind. That's the number one thing you need to have, right? In today's video, guys, I'm gonna share with you a couple of things that I've used and many of my successful friends in sales have used to get out of lows, okay? So that's one of the things you guys need to do. First of all, flip the switch on rejection. Flip the switch on no's and what that means. In sales, it's inevitable. You're gonna get no, you're gonna get rejected, okay? And the difference between the people who are successful and the people who are not is the way that they take those no's, okay? So take every no as an experience for you to learn. Maybe you need to redefine your pitch. Maybe you need to redefine your approach, right? And I'll tell you another thing that helped me out tremendously is reviewing your own sales calls. Do apologize for the failed attempt of this phone. However, this is one of the most important things, most valuable things. This is fucking gold, guys. To go back and to listen to your calls whenever you guys were at your highs, right? And just tap into that. See how your energy was. How was your enthusiasm? Where did you pause? Where did you make a joke? See how your confidence was, right? And with that, that's the easiest thing you can do. Just tap into that and you should be able to bounce back right away. So record your calls. Super, super damn important. The third thing that you need to do, I struggled with this for a very long time. When I got into my lows could have lasted for weeks. And it's because I tried to do the same thing on the phone. I got too cocky. I'm like, I don't want help. I'm just gonna do this again and again. But there's strategies that you need to use that'll help you get you out from your lows. And one of them is set smaller goals. If you're on a high streak making, 10K, 20K every single month, and suddenly you're like doing half of that or less, then this is what you need to do, okay? Set smaller goals so that you can build back that confidence, all right? Something like even simple as having a good conversation. Don't focus on the sale anymore. Just focus on having a good conversation, finding out the pains, the goals, really connecting on a deep level, just having better conversations. The second thing is doing X amount of calls, X amount of dials. Like today, I'm gonna have 10 conversations with 10 people and no aliens. But anyways, have like X amount of dials. And another thing you do is even smaller. This is one of my good friends, Aman, told me this, is that wake up at a certain time, It's like today I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. no matter what. And that's a small win. That's gonna get you back in the groove of things, right? Small wins. Guys in the back, do you guys have any other advice from your experiences? I'm talking to gentlemen behind the camera that have made multiple six figures in sales every single year. So you guys, I've seen you in your lows, guys. Come on, speak up.
Reading books, fill your mind with information. You can't pour into other people with an empty cup.
Read books, find new information. You can't pour into others with an empty cup on sales calls if you got nothing in you. So the best thing you can do, I like that. Just go read a book, even a sales book or any book, a self-development book that's gonna, give you value, and so that you can give that value on the sales call, so you can transfer some information, and that's gonna make you seem like more of an expert in your field, give you a little bit more confidence. Anything else, guys?
Make thy bed.
Make thy bed. That's a good one. Thank you, James. James is even not in sales. He's in cybersecurity. Yeah, another thing, yes, make your bed in the morning. That's a small win. That's a small win, right? All right, 4, seek mentorship. So sales is like a sport. There's only so much that you can do and self-learn, do things by yourself. You need somebody who's gonna look at you from an outsider's perspective and look at the small things that you don't notice, right? Similarly, like in the gym, sometimes you can't even notice your form, if you're lifting properly or not. You need a coach to remind you to breathe, tuck in your butt whenever you're doing squats. Small things like that can change the whole trajectory of how you close deals, right? So seek mentorship. This space is full of, there's a lot of good coaches out there. Don't be afraid to invest into yourself. Because remember, guys, you're in sales. What are you doing in sales? You are trying to have people invest in themselves, right? If you're not willing to invest in yourself, then how do you expect people to invest into your program, right? So invest in yourself. Number 5, this is my personal favorite meditation. I believe that this has literally changed the whole trajectory of my life. And whenever I get into my lows, what I like to do is sit down on a pen and piece of paper. I like to visualize. Visualize exactly what I want in my life. I want to make 20K a month. I want to work with cool people. I want to be able to work 5 hours a day. I want to be able to close X amount of people and write everything down. And another thing I do is on the other side is write down, how would you feel? How would you feel if you were able to make 20 grand a month? How would you feel if you did surround yourself with cool people? You'd feel joy. You would feel fulfilled. You would feel happy. You'd feel at peace, right? So write these down. Write it down. And then go to a quiet place, okay? Go to a quiet place, and for 10 minutes, this is what I want you to do. Close your eyes, and for the first 5, you're just gonna sit down, quiet spot, cross your legs, or lie down, and I want you to just calm your body, calm your mind from top to bottom. From like relaxing your eyelids, relax your jaw, drop the tongue from the roof of your mouth all the way down to relaxing your toes. And the reason why that's so important, guys, is because if your whole body's relaxed, it is impossible for you to feel stressed if every muscle is relaxed. Once you're there, for another 5 minutes, I want you to go back and visualize exactly what you want. Visualize yourself literally like having a great conversation, connecting with somebody. Visualize yourself taking them through the checkout, collecting the payment. Visualize yourself, that confident self, the confident salesperson that you're trying to be. And just do that for 5 minutes. And the reason why this is so important, because now you're priming your brain and body for this to be normal. Once you step out of this meditation and into the real world, Now you're remembering exactly what you want and how you should feel all the time. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to feel at peace whenever I make money. I'm going to feel happy whenever I close the deal. I'm going to feel fulfilled whenever I make X amount of money or start this business. But really, people have it backwards. You need to feel gratitude first. You need to feel abundance first, peace first, happiness first, and then it will come. And that's why this is so damn important for you to kind of, reframe your mind and start stepping into that person that you're trying to be. And this all obviously relates to the law of attraction. And before you know it, like life is going to give you like little breadcrumbs, and you're going to be like, oh shit, this just happened today out of nowhere. Oh, this just happened. Oh, just close this deal. Oh, things are going well. Why? Because you're priming your brain and body. And that's it, folks, for this video. I hope you guys got some value. It's so important just to embrace the journey. Whatever journey you're on, embrace it with its ups and downs. Success leaves clues and failure leaves clues as well. So always keep that in mind. Have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.
Yo, welcome Millionaire Closers family. Excited to bring a banger training with you guys. It's your boy Aman, and in this video, we're gonna be going over how to increase show-up rate. Now, as a closer, it is crucial to have your prospects show up to the meeting. Without a prospect on the call or the meeting, guess what? It's impossible to close a deal. Now, some common practices I've seen closers implement being in this industry for the past 5 years. First things first, they send confirmation emails. I can't remember the last time I checked my email before an actual important meeting. I don't know about you guys. Number 2, people sending texts before the meeting. And number 3, a confirmation call before the meeting. Now, all jokes aside, don't get me wrong. The strategies above, they're good. However, from my personal experience, it's missing something. Personalization and human connection. Remember, this is one of the reasons people buy. And it's also something that will influence someone to show up to a meeting. Now, here's something I like to personally do that has taken my show-up rate from under 30% to 60% in the past 12 months alone. Sending personalized videos. A quick 30-second to minute-long video to your prospect, especially if it's an inbound booked appointment. Send some love. Use the info that they've typed up on the application to tailor your message to them. Make sure you look presentable, make sure you look fresh, make sure you have a somewhat professional background behind you, have high energy and enthusiasm, don't forget to smile. And I'll give you guys a quick example, just so you guys can copy, send this to your prospects, or eventually, when we place you, what you're gonna do to the inbound leads on your calendar. Phone. Hey, Mr. Prospect, I noticed we have a scheduled call tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Looking forward to connecting with you. I know your goal here is to make enough money to eventually free yourself and your family from the corporate rat race. I'm excited to see how me and my team can help you do that. Till tomorrow, be great. Talk to you then. It's as simple as that, guys. Don't overcomplicate things. Keep things short, sweet, concise. And don't forget, always add the human touch. I'll see you guys on another training. Your boy Aman. Catch you on the next one.
Peace. Okay, let's talk about Zoom calls. Okay, so, a lot of people getting started with sales calls, they have this, they're a little bit scared to jump on Zoom calls when they're doing sales. They prefer phone calls. They think that it's easier because, they don't have to show their face and all this stuff. And I'll tell you this, it depends on the person 100%, but keep in mind that building rapport on Zoom is a lot easier. Not in terms of the questions you ask, right? You still got to ask equally good questions, but when you're talking to somebody face to face, and you can put a face to the name, you can see who you're talking to, you can see their facial expressions, their, hand gestures, their appearance overall, you tend to trust them more than somebody who you cannot actually connect their voice and face to. Okay, so overall, presenting on Zoom, especially if you're just starting out, is a little bit easier in terms of building rapport, but there are a couple other things you need to consider. This is, I'd say, overall pretty simple stuff. We could get, pretty deep when it comes to facial expressions and hand gestures and eye contact. Sometimes you actually shouldn't show eye contact, which, a lot of people think that they should be, face to face like this, staring at their prospects the whole time. So we could get deep on this and, make it all complicated, but I'll keep it pretty simple for beginners, intermediate level as well, if you're kind of just starting out and you're getting on Zoom calls. So number one thing that's super important is your background. Now look, in all fairness, I do understand that not everybody has this, beautiful office that we have, with the perfect lighting and all this stuff. I get it. But if that's not you and, you don't have like a home office or just like a nice, clean, simple setup, simply set up a virtual background. Super cool with Zoom or Google Meet, pretty much whatever you're using, you could set up a virtual background. Okay, what I suggest for virtual backgrounds is not something totally random. Like it shouldn't be a galaxy or like a city view. Either make it something clean, maybe like an office view, or another cool thing you could do is you could actually upload an image and create that as your background. For example, one thing that we did for one of my big clients, my remote staff did, is they basically took a screenshot of the company's logo and they uploaded that as the background. So whenever they were on Zoom, their background was basically white, black, and red, and it had a few pictures basically in each corner of the client's logo, right? Super clean, super simple, right? Don't have your dog and your cat running around in the background. If you have kids, don't have your kids running around in the background. I mean, this is all pretty much common sense stuff, but I'll mention it anyway. So your background has to be clean. No distractions. Isn't that too beautiful? It's gotta be clean and no distraction. So what's a distraction? I don't know. Don't have your TV playing in the background, for example, right? Don't be watching Netflix in the background. I don't want Suits on the TV, right? Make it super simple. You and I are having a conversation. You're the focus, okay? Don't throw anything in the background that might be distracting. I know some people put like lights, like the LED lights and shit. Yeah, RGB lights. Don't make it difficult for me to have a conversation with you. I don't want lights flashing in my face. Keep the background clean, nothing that would distract me. Now let's talk about the frame. I don't need your whole body in the Zoom, definitely not. But a lot of people make this mistake where when they set up their web camera, they only have their head showing, okay? It feels like you're hiding, okay? You're hiding in the frame. And what that does subconsciously is it makes people lose trust. It looks like you're hiding, right? You're not fully transparent. So make sure, on the Zoom, what you should see, we'll do a demonstration, we'll cut into it. We can edit this after. You should see about up to your chest, okay? Maybe a little bit lower between your chest and your belly button, that's good. And then obviously, back to your, well, this will come later, but your appearance, it's gotta be clean, okay? Don't be wearing a ripped up t-shirt, Ladies, same thing, just look clean. We don't need to see your belly piercings, okay? Look clean. Clean and professional on these calls, right? I would say about right here is good. Also, obviously, don't be too zoomed in, but also don't be too far back from your camera, okay? You gotta fill the space as well, right? So just make sure it's framed well. Appearance, professional, right? You gotta look professional. Now, this, similar to the way we communicate verbally and the tonality on these calls, you have to adjust to the people you're speaking to. If you're selling a fitness offer and you're personally jacked, okay, sure, wear like a tighter shirt, show off your muscles. If you're selling something to lawyers, put on a dress shirt, right? Make it easy for them to connect with you. Lawyers see people in suits every day. You don't have to wear a suit, that's overboard, but put on a nice dress shirt or something, along those lines. Make sure you're not coming out of the shower from a workout sweaty. I mean, these are all pretty simple things, and I would say it's common sense, but just make sure your appearance is somebody that you would like to speak to when you're having a sales conversation. Someone presentable, someone who looks like they know what they're talking about, somebody professional. And there's a little bit of leeway. You could adjust to the type of people you generally speak to, the audience we'll call it. But overall, just make sure you look professional. Okay. Facial expressions. Your facial expressions have to change when you're speaking to somebody, depending on the context, right? Think about it as if you're speaking to your friends. If your friends tell you something that's, crazy or something exciting, you want to look like you're excited. If your, friends are telling you about their pain point, if your prospect's telling you about their pain points, you may want to sound a little bit more or look a little bit more concerned. Again, it all depends on the context of the conversation, right? Eye contact. You want to have eye contact on these calls, but you also don't want to be staring at your prospect the whole time. I remember I was buying this one software for our marketing division on our team, and I was on the sales call, and the guy literally would not take his eyes off of me. It was like super strange. And there's these like softwares now, apps that kind of correct your eye contact. So even if you're like reading a script or something, it changes the way your eyes look to make it look like you're looking at the camera. It looked like that's what he was using. Super strange. Like he was staring at me like this the whole time. Thought it was like some AI shit. Super weird, okay? So just be human, right? Yes, you want to have eye contact when you're speaking and the prospect speaking to you, but it's okay to look at your notes sometimes. Hey, this person told me X, Y, and Z. Okay, I'm thinking. Make sure it's human, okay? People buy from people. People don't buy from salespeople, right? You walk into a store, you're going shopping, men especially. You go to the mall, you walk into the store, you know exactly what you want to buy. A salesperson comes up to you, they say, hey, can I help you find anything? What's your immediate response? No, I'm just looking. Men, are we really just looking? I know women go shopping and they're just looking. But men, are we really just looking? I personally don't. I know exactly what I want. The reason I said I'm just looking is because they're a salesperson, and that's my initial instinct reaction. People don't want to buy from salespeople. People want to buy from people, okay? So just be human. Okay, and then the last thing is hand gestures, right? That's why it's important as well to have your hands on camera. Do not do your calls like this. Do not have your arms crossed when you're on a call. I know I used to do this a lot. I know it's comfortable. I get it. It makes you feel what? Anyone know? Closed off, right? It makes you look like you're closed off. You're not open to hearing what your prospect has to say. It makes you closed off. And what happens when you're closed off and you're not listening to the prospect? Guess what? They're not going to tell you all their pain points. They're not going to feel comfortable getting vulnerable with you. Hands open, hands in front of you, okay? Your posture has to be good. Not your composure, which you talked about earlier. Your posture. Don't be slouched over. Be a professional. Keep your, posture straight. And use your hands when you're communicating with somebody. I think this is all pretty much common sense stuff. If you don't know where to place your hands, just have them in front of you like this, or like this, whatever it is. Not like this. Okay? I think one of the most important things is the frame. I see people mess this up the most. I get on Zooms and only their head is showing. Looks like they're hiding. Okay, can't hide. And then obviously the background also super important. Okay, that's kind of like a general, brief on how to conduct these Zoom calls. Also easier, to break the ice, like if you're jumping on a Zoom call with somebody and you notice they got, like I got on a Zoom call, I remember this, with a prospect, it was a while ago, and I saw like a framed basketball. I personally used to play basketball. I'm like, dude, and I saw like a signature or something. I'm like, dude, that's awesome, man. Tell me about that. And they told me it was it was a ball signed by Kobe Bryant, which is super cool. And we kind of just connected on that a little bit. That's not to say that's how you build rapport. It's definitely not, but it's an easy way to break the ice, point out things you see. Okay. That's kind of the fundamentals, guys, to Zoom. And these are kind of the main things. We can go deeper on this on one of the coaching calls, and we will. But these are kind of the main things to consider. Your background, the framing, your appearance overall, your facial expressions, and your hand gestures, okay? Learn this, apply it to your next Zoom calls, and crush more deals. Okay, we'll keep this one casual. A question I get all the time is, what is my routine? What was my daily routine when I was on calls all day long? And really, when I think about that question, I think about like, what do they really want? What are you guys really trying to find out when you ask that question? And oftentimes I feel like the response you're looking for is some like hack to always stay sharp and to always stay on top of it and always be in, flow state. But really, like, there's not one thing that works for everyone. What worked for me doesn't work for Misha, Ahmad, or Rome, or any of my sales guys all the time, right? So it's like there's certain elements that might be transferable. And really the most important thing when it comes to routines is like, number one, find what puts you in a flow state, what gets you in the groove. Like, you know, sometimes you have these days where you're on top of it, you're ready to rock, you're in the zone. And then other days you just don't feel like doing anything, which is fine. It happens to all of us, but you always have to have something that gets you in that flow state mentally where you're just on the ball, right? Whether that's going to the gym and getting a workout in, whether it's going on a walk, whether it's reading a book, whether it's getting some more training, whatever it is, inspiration, right? Figure out what it is for you that gets you in the groove, okay? That's number one. Figure out what gets you in that flow state. One thing that I recommend is role play. It's annoying to do it every single day, but just that little bit of practice, that little bit of a challenge every morning, like, Matt, give me an objection, let's rock, you know, like that's what puts a lot of people in a flow state, right? That's number one, okay? Find what puts you in a flow state. You know, there's not like one thing that works for everyone, but then number two is discipline. Right? You're going to have days where you just don't feel like getting on calls. That's the reality of it. I used to have it, especially towards, I don't want to say the end of my career, but like towards the end of my time where I was like on calls for 14 hours a day because then I was hiring and building a team and all this stuff. I had that a lot. Like there were many days where I just didn't want to be on calls, but you got to realize it's the same thing with like sports and athletes. The days that you don't want to put in the work, the days that you don't want to lift weights, the day, you know, the reps that feel heavy and you want to drop the weight, that's what makes the biggest improvement. It's the same thing here, right? So it's like the days that you don't want to get on calls, but you do it and you force yourself, the days where, you know, you just want to kick back a little bit, but you make the extra 10, 20, 30 dials outbound, that's what makes the discipline, right? And the repetition and the consistency is what's going to lead to, number one, your personal development. Number two, the discipline being developed, right? Where nothing can really shake you. And then number three, ultimately your earnings, right? There's so many people in sales that really, their flow state and they're on the ball 10 days out of the month. What about the rest? What about the 20 others or 21 others, right? You won't always have flow state, but you have to have discipline in order to compensate for when you don't have that flow. One thing, I'll tell you a couple things that worked for me. Number one, growth and personal development, right? I read books every single day when I was making calls for 14 hours a day and make at least 30 minutes to read or watch YouTube videos or learn from people. Number two was definitely role plays. I would role play all the time with a couple of my sales guys that I hired just to challenge myself. And then number three, something that has absolutely nothing to do with sales, right? So whether that be going on a walk, going to the gym, for me it was basketball, you know, those days where I was just like tired of everything, tired of talking to people on the phone, tired of literally like anything sales related, I would go outside, play basketball. I used to play basketball. That was my thing. That helps me completely disconnect and I don't think about sales. I put in AirPods, I put some music on, I'm listening, I'm shooting around. That's what gets me like in a state where like I don't really think about sales or anything else. So figure out what those things are for you. Yes, you don't want to be thinking about sales 24/7. You'll probably go crazy, but you have to find what works for you and gets you in a flow state. Number two, you got to stay disciplined. Number three, something to be able to take your mind off things. I hope that helps. There's not much to this whiteboard here for this video, but work on those three things. I think you'll see a lot of improvement in your day-to-day sales career. Okay? I'll see you in the next one.